Chapter 10:23. When the crowd saw this, they were all stunned. No one had expected that Nyetian would suddenly make a move. This was the first time Nyetian had used absolute tremor in such a way, and it was released on 3 people at the same time. It seemed that in that split second just now, the mysterious Call to Divine rune, in his divine sense, had caused his spiritual force to undergo some kind of miraculous change, and his perception had actually increased by several times. At this moment, everyone's aura was accurately grasped by him. It was as if a strange image had appeared in his mind, and everyone's aura was sensed on that image. Nyetian's silhouette appeared in the blink of an eye, activating absolute tremor, causing Ren Yihong and the other 2 to fall into a trance. His entire body surged with a powerful aura, and endless power wrapped around Nyeyuro and Xiaoling. At that moment, the sky turned into a sea of flames. Zhang Yuan sensed that Nyetian wanted to save him and immediately acted. At the same time, Mo Rushi also acted. Before Nyetian rescued Zhang Yuan, he had already informed Mo Rushi to pay attention to Zhang Yuan. Up in the sky, Zhang Yuan slapped down with his palm. Surging flames wreaked havoc in the space, turning the area within 1,000 meters into a furnace. Even the air seemed to be burning. What a terrifying flame power! The eyes of the crowd trembled. The sea of flames around Zhang Yuan's body was extremely violent. If one looked closely, they would see that there was actually a layer of mysterious energy that was faintly changing the power of heaven and earth. That was the power of heaven and earth laws, a power that only Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists could utilize. Mo Rushi's figure soared into the sky, and the phoenix wings behind her spread open. They were dozens of meters long, and they were like flaming blades tearing through the void. Zhang Yuan's eyes widened in shock when he saw a figure rushing towards him. A look of fear appeared on his face. He sensed an abnormally violent flame power from Mo Rushi's body, as if it could incinerate and devour everything. His flame power actually trembled in front of Mo Rushi, as if it had sensed a huge threat and was completely out of his control. How is this possible? Zhang Yuan's heart was filled with courage and shock. This was his own power, but he couldn't control it. It was too strange. Mo Rushi released the flames of the fire phoenix behind her. It was the divine fire of the ancient divine phoenix, and it could suppress almost all fire-attributed powers. Even the starry sky, sacred flame in Nyetian's body was incomparable to the fire phoenix flame. Mo Rushi's body rushed forward, and a shadow of a fire phoenix appeared around her. The power of crimson flames flew through the air like a sharp blade. Although the aura was extremely hot, it made people feel a bone-piercing chill from the bottom of their hearts. Boom! The power of fire whistled past, and the sea of fire around Zhang Yuan's body was actually smashed to pieces. His face was filled with shock, and his mouth was wide open, but he couldn't make a single sound. His entire body was directly incinerated into nothingness, and not even ashes were left. A Heaven Realm assassin, a first-level Heavenly Emperor strength martial artist, died tragically just like that, without leaving behind even his bones. People gasped when they saw the scene in the sky, and they looked at Mo Rushi with fear in their eyes. Before Mo Rushi made her move, no one paid any attention to her existence, thinking that she was just an ordinary girl who was at most a little beautiful. However, the scene in front of them completely shocked them. It turned out that this beautiful girl's strength was so valiant. It seemed like Mo Rushi's strength was even stronger than Nyetian's. When Li saw Mo Rushi kill Zhang Yuan in one move, he was directly petrified on the spot. Originally, he had already sensed what Nyetian wanted to do and was already prepared to make a move, but he didn't expect Mo Rushi to be a step ahead of him. Previously, he also didn't pay too much attention to Mo Rushi. At this moment, he suddenly discovered that the latter actually had the strength of a Heavenly Emperor. A Heavenly Emperor martial artist. Lie's first reaction was that it was impossible. However, when he thought that Mo Rushi was someone following by Nyetian's side, his heart was much calmer. Eh. When Mo Rushi saw that Zhang Yuan was killed in one move, her brows furrowed, and she was actually very surprised. She also didn't expect that the latter was actually so weak. Mo Rushi was able to kill Zhang Yuan in one move. Apart from her own strength being strong enough, another important reason was that Zhang Yuan was a fire attribute martial artist, and he was completely suppressed by Mo Rushi. This kind of suppression was destructive, and Zhang Yuan's strength couldn't be unleashed at all. Mo Rushi's gaze looked towards the ground. Nie Tian had already successfully saved Nie Yuro and Xiao Ling Er. Nie Tian sensed Nie Yuro's aura. Although it was weak, it was very stable, and her life shouldn't be in danger. Big brother Nie Tian. Xiao Ling saw Nie Tian, and she cried out in grief. She couldn't hold back her tears anymore, and she burst into tears. Rushi, come and look after them. When Nie Tian heard Xiao Ling O's crying, the anger in his heart burned even more. He said to Mo Rushi, and then he took a step forward, and killing intent rose from his body. At this time, Ren Hong had already woken up, and his eyes were filled with astonishment. Just now, when he was in a trance, he seemed to have seen Zhang Yuan being engulfed by a flame. When he confirmed that the scene was not an illusion, his whole body stiffened, and his eyes revealed great shock. You want to kill me? In the next moment, Ren Hong felt a cold, killing intent enveloping him, and he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes, and the fear on his face intensified. This killing intent was too strong, and it revealed extreme cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness. An assassin from the heaven realm? Nie Tian's eyes were bloodshot, and the anger in his body turned into a monstrous killing intent. He suddenly roared, "I'll kill you!" As his violent voice fell, Nie Tian's figure moved, and the sword Absolute Heaven slash appeared in his hand. The sword intent around him condensed into a giant sword shadow, and it surged with killing intent. Die! As the sharp voice fell, the sword burning with the starry sky's sacred flame slashed down, and in an instant, the space shook violently, as if the heaven and earth were about to collapse. When Ren Hong saw the giant flaming sword above his head, he was stunned for a moment, and by the time he reacted, it was too late. In a battle between the strong, life and death could be decided in an instant. The aura around Ren Hong's body exploded, and he mobilized the laws of heaven and earth in an attempt to resist the fatal sword that was pressing down on his head. But unfortunately, he was one step too late. The fatal sword fell directly before he could gather his aura. Boom! There was a deafening sound, and the heaven and earth trembled. The huge sword intent surged like a monstrous wave, and terrible cracks appeared on the ground. Ren Hong's figure was directly swallowed by the sword intent, and on the ground, there was a deep ravine that was thousands of meters long, as if the earth was damaged by an earthquake. Rumble. In the distance, the entire alchemist guild shook, and it began to collapse continuously, setting off turbid waves that soared into the sky. The shocking scene made everyone's eyes widen, and they were all dumbfounded. Countless pairs of eyes stared at Nie Tian, and all of them had a look of disbelief. The scene fell into a dead silence. Nie Tian's sword was too strong. Not only did it kill Ren Hong, but it also killed a few people around him. Chapter 10:24. The atmosphere in the huge square was dead silent. Everyone stared at the silver-haired figure with the sword in his hand. Their nerves were taut, and they did not even dare to breathe loudly. Nie Tian stood there, the sword intent around him, still surging wildly. The murderous intent on his face had not dissipated. Suddenly, he turned around and locked his cold eyes on Yin Su. Yin Su was in a daze. Her eyes were wide open and her mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out. Everything that had happened was too shocking. She could not react at all. Zhang Yuan and Ren Hong were both heavenly emperors. How could they be killed in an instant? The situation had changed too quickly. She could not accept it at all. The dog that bit for you is dead. It's your turn now. Nie Tian's voice was low. He took a step forward, and a cold aura filled the air. Nie Yuro and Ling were in danger because of this woman. How could he let the culprit go? You can't. Yunsu suddenly felt a suffocating, murderous intent shrouding her. It was as if the space around her had stopped, frozen by the murderous intent. Her lips trembled, and her voice trembled. Before she could finish, a sword ray flashed in the air, and the sound of flesh being pierced could be heard. Yunsu felt a chill on her neck, and a gust of cold wind penetrated her body. Her vitality was cut off in an instant. Her body trembled, and she fell to the ground dead. Dead? The crowd was stunned. They looked at the corpse on the ground in disbelief. In the blink of an eye, Yunsu and the others were all dead. Such a dramatic turn of events made everyone feel dizzy, and they could not react for a long time. Mother! Just then a howl sounded. It was Qianlong Ingzheng, who pounced on Yunsu's corpse. No matter what Yunsu had done, she was still Qianlong Ingzheng's mother. Nie Tian glanced at Qianlong Ingzheng, but he retracted his murderous intent. Qianlong Ingzheng did not know the whole thing, so there was no need for Nie Tian to kill him. Teacher, Li Yi walked over. He had already killed Yin Han. Li Yi, I'll leave this to you, Nie Tian said solemnly. He wasn't sure of Nie Yuro's condition, so he needed to find a place to properly examine her body. Yes, Li Yi nodded solemnly. Teacher, my residence is nearby. I'll have someone take you there. Li Yi was very meticulous and thought of everything thoroughly. Father. At that moment, a familiar figure appeared. It was Li Yulai. Nie Tian and Li Yulai had met before, and they had even exchanged blows. Yulai, come and pay your respects to your grandmaster, Li Yi said with a smile. Li Yulai was stunned and only reacted after a long time. He had no choice but to kneel in front of Nie Tian. Yulai greets grandmaster. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the youth from the 3,000 small worlds would actually be his grandmaster. At this moment, Li Yulai also understood why Nie Tian did not allow the ancient dragon soul to kill him. Then, Nie Tian did not stay any longer. He left the rest of the mess to Li Yi to deal with, and followed Li Yulai to the Li residence. Corpse Luo, is ninth sister all right? In the room, Nie Tian's expression was nervous. His forehead was covered in beads of sweat. He had already checked Nie Yuro's body and did not find anything abnormal. But the strange thing was that Nie Yuro's aura was very weak, and her consciousness was in a coma. Nie Tian did not know what was going on, so he let Corpse Luo Demon Lord check again. Corpse Luo Demon Lord also frowned at this moment. His expression was not very good. He pondered for a moment before saying, her Yuan spirit Yuan meridian is normal, but the 1,000-gem illusory seal in her body seems to have been stimulated by something. It has become very strange, as if it is sealing itself. Sealing itself? Nie Tian was stunned. He did not understand what Corpse Luo Demon Lord meant. This is a self-protection method of the 1,000-gem seal. When it is threatened, it will reverse from an awakened state to a sealed state. Corpse Luo Demon Lord explained, it is because of this that her aura has become very weak. Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. He had only heard of illusory seals awakening. He had never heard of illusory seals being able to seal themselves. Nie Tian thought for a moment and asked, 1,000-gem illusory seal sealing itself. What harm is there to ninth sister? Will her life be in danger? There is no danger to her life. Corpse Luo shook his head and said, but after the illusory seal is sealed, her martial arts talent will be reduced. Her Yuan spirit and Yuan meridian will also be affected and weakened. Nie Tian nodded. As long as there was no danger to her life, then he asked, after the 1,000-gem illusory seal seals itself, can it be awakened again? Corpse Luo Demon Lord frowned and said, in theory, yes, but it is very difficult to awaken again. If there is no special opportunity, it will be very difficult to awaken again. Nie Tian frowned, and his expression was somewhat gloomy. Zhang Yuan and the others must have done something to Nie Yuro that caused a 1,000-gem illusory seal in her body to seal itself. Fortunately, Nie Yuro's life was not in danger. If her talent was weak, then so be it. In any case, she was still young. There would be a chance to awaken the 1,000-gem illusory seal again in the future. Corpse Luo, when will ninth sister wake up? Nye Tian could feel that Nye Yuro's consciousness was in a coma and could not help but ask worriedly. She will wake up after the illusory seal ends. It will take about 5 to 10 days. Corpse Luo Demon Lord nodded, and then returned to the chaotic origin coffin. Nye Tian let out a long breath of foul air, feeling somewhat relieved. Nye Yuro's current strength was already very strong. She had actually reached the 9th level of heavenly evolution. It should be known that she was only 13 years old. In his previous life, when Nye Tian was 13 years old, he also did not have a cultivation of the 9th level of heavenly evolution. Ninth sister, don't worry. I will find a way to let you awaken the 1,000-gem illusory seal again. Nye Tian looked at the still unconscious Nye Yuro and murmured, then left first. Following that, Nye Tian visited Xiaoling. After making sure that the latter was fine, he asked Demo Rushi to accompany Xiaoling, first before he left the residence and headed to Li Guijiang's place. A moment later, Nye Tian arrived at Li Guijiang's shabby little courtyard. Mr. Qiushan could not help but shout when he saw Nye Tian appear. He had seen the battle at the Alchemist's Guild just now, but he remembered the task that Nye Tian had given him, so he did not dare to leave and stayed by Li Guijiang's side. More importantly, Qiushan believed that with Nye Tian's strength, he would be able to deal with any enemy. Nye Tian nodded slightly. After seeing Li Guijiang again, he did not linger and headed to the Mystical Flower Valley with the latter. The Mystical Flower Valley was located at the edge of the 3rd outer city of Holy Light Imperial City. It was a very secretive place. Along the way, Li Guijiang was shocked when he learned about what had happened at the Alchemist's Guild. He did not expect that Nye Tian would kill Yin Han, Tang Haifeng, and the others. A few hours later, Nye Tian and the others appeared outside a valley. Chapter 1025. Icefire Dragon Grass, Beast King Spirit Sprout, Celestial Precious Root, Golden Lion Fruit, and Nye Tian stood outside the exotic flower valley and suddenly said the names of many spiritual herbs. Then his eyes trembled strangely and his throat moved. He said 4 words, Magic Flower Blood Lotus. How is this possible? Li Guijiang screamed when he heard what Nye Tian said. He froze on the spot and looked at Nye Tian in disbelief. The names that Nye Tian said were all kinds of exotic flowers in the exotic flower valley, but they were hundreds of meters away from the exotic flower valley. Could Nye Tian's eyes see through everything? And Nye Tian was obviously very familiar with these exotic flowers. Who was he? Was he an alchemist or exotic flower master? Li Guijiang's guess was right. Nye Tian's eyes did have the ability to see through things, but he didn't use starry eyes at this time. Nye Tian was just relying on the fragrance of the flowers around him, and then all kinds of exotic flower patterns appeared in his mind, as if he was already inside them. What's going on? At this time, Nye Tian suddenly realized something. His pupils shrank slightly, and his face showed a look of surprise. When he was feeling the fragrance of the flowers just now, he could actually distinguish all the fragrances one by one, and then the scene inside the exotic flower valley appeared in his mind. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, and his expression was one of astonishment. His perception seemed to have suddenly increased by more than several times. In the past, he could barely distinguish the aura of some spiritual herbs among many spiritual herbs, but it was definitely not as easy as it was now. At this time, his perception had simply taken a qualitative leap. It seemed that as long as his divine sense swept over, a picture of divine sense would appear in his mind. And this picture was very strange. It was not a normal visual picture, but a picture formed according to the aura of the perception. This is too strange. Nye Tian was stiff for a few seconds before he finally reacted, but he was still shocked. He remembered that when Nye Yuro and Xiaoling were in danger, there seemed to be some kind of mysterious fusion between his divine sense and the mysterious cauldron divine rune, and then this strange picture would appear in his mind. Elderly, let's go in first. Nye Tian suppressed the shock in his heart. and gestured for Li Guijiang to enter the valley. Li Guijiang looked at the mystical flower valley in front of him. His expression moved, and tears streamed down his face. This was the flower valley that he had spent his entire life building, but it was snatched away by Yunhan. Now that he could return to the flower valley, he was naturally excited. At this time, several figures walked out of the mystical flower valley. They were the guards of the mystical flower valley and the gardeners. You are Lord Nietian. When the leader of the group saw Nietian, his voice trembled as he called out respectfully, not even daring to raise his head. Although it had only been half a day, the news that Nietian had killed Yunhan had spread throughout the Holy Light Empire. Moreover, everyone already knew that the Holy Light Empire had completely changed because of the arrival of Nietian. Everything in the mystical flower valley will remain the same. From today on, Elder Li is the Valley Master of the mystical flower valley. In the future, everything in the mystical flower valley will be under his command. Nietian said in a deep voice, and then suddenly raised his voice. Did you hear that? The gloomy voice exploded in everyone's heart like a clap of thunder, making them tremble from the depths of their souls. In an instant, they felt as if they had fallen into hell, filled with fear and despair. Nietian knew that Li Yi must have already informed the people here. Now he was doing all this to deter these people. Li Yi was a meticulous person. He thought of everything very thoroughly. Yes, everyone came to their senses and nodded repeatedly. The moment of despair, just now, made them realize how terrifying Nietian was. Elder Li, please. Nietian regained his composure and smiled faintly. Li Guijiang's body trembled with excitement, as if he had seen his child that he hadn't seen for many years. He directly rushed into the mystical flower valley. Nietian and Xiushan exchanged a glance and followed him into the valley. My flowers! When Li Guijiang arrived at the mystical flower valley, he was like a madman. He kept screaming and looking at the various flowers in the mystical flower valley. As expected of the mystical flower valley, Nietian couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the scenery around him. In the mystical flower valley, hundreds of flowers were in full bloom, competing with each other for beauty, and it was full of vitality. Xiushan's expression was also somewhat dumbfounded. Although he basically didn't recognize these flowers, the exuberant vitality and rich aura had already shocked him. After a moment, Nietian became cold. He once again sensed the aura of the mystical flower valley, and the entire power of heaven and earth spread out in his mind. What a powerful spiritual chi vein! The scene of the underground mine appeared in Nietian's mind. The rich spiritual chi of heaven and earth made his eyes tremble, and he exclaimed in surprise. No wonder so many strange flowers could be bred here. It turned out that there was a spiritual chi vein in the underground of the valley. Nietian examined himself with rapt attention and discovered that the spiritual chi veins in the wondrous flower valley were even vaster than the ones in the 3,000 small worlds. They even extended thousands of meters into the ground, like a bottomless pit of spiritual chi that would never be used up. This place is very good. Nietian was slightly excited. This kind of place was enough for a 9th-rank spiritual material to grow comfortably. At this time, Nietian already had an idea in his mind. When he returned to the Heaven Realm, he must get a lot of 9th-rank spiritual materials and cultivate them in the mystical Flower Valley, turning the mystical Flower Valley into a base for cultivating 9th-rank spiritual materials. Lord Nietian, please follow me. At this time, Li Guijiang finally regained his composure and came to Nietian's side and said. Nietian nodded, and then came to the depths of the mystical Flower Valley. A clear lake appeared in front of him. Nietian's gaze touched the lake. In the center of the lake, there was a bright red, which made his eyes tremble. The center of the lake was filled with blood-red flowers. From afar, it looked like a scarlet flame surging in the water. Illusory flower blood lotus. Nietian blurted out in a daze, almost holding his breath. There were dozens of illusion flower blood lotuses in front of him. Moreover, they were connected in a row, which gave people a strong visual impact. Sigh. At this time, Li Guijiang sighed and said, "Originally, the illusion flower blood lotuses filled the blood lotus lake. I didn't expect that there would only be so many left." Nie Tian was stunned. So this was originally a blood lotus lake. It seemed that Yun Han and the others had wasted a lot of illusion flower blood lotuses. Thinking of this, Nie Tian's heart ached. The illusion flower blood lotuses were the flower that saved Mo Rushi's life. But it was too late now. With so many illusion flower blood lotuses, Mo Rushi would be safe for the time being. "Elderly, how long do you need to cultivate the illusion flower blood lotuses again?" Nie Tian thought for a moment and asked. "About half a year." Elderly sighed. Looking at the scarlet flame in front of him, he felt his heart ache. Nie Tian nodded. This kind of thing couldn't be rushed. Nie Tian thought for a moment and left for the time being. He planned to return to the mystical flower valley 3 months later and let the illusion flower blood lotuses grow for a period of time. Chapter 10:26. After returning to the mansion, Nie Tian was still worried. He went to check on Nie Yuro and Qiu Linger to make sure that they were fine. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. Then, Nie Tian returned to his room. There were some things that he didn't understand, so he had to ask the Sword Elder. "You said that in your mind, there will be an image formed by aura?" The Sword Elder was stunned after listening to Nie Tian's words. He immediately said, "Try again." Nie Tian nodded and immediately spread out his divine sense. Within the radius of his divine sense, everything was perceived by him. A tree, a stone, a grass, a flower, and even the aura of everyone around him appeared. An image formed by aura appeared in Nie Tian's mind. This image was very different from a real visual image, but it made Nie Tian feel that it was clearer than a visual image. He could perceive the outline of every inch of the image, even the trend of every movement, and even the trend of the entire image. Holographic projection. The Sword Elder perceived the image in Nie Tian's mind. He was stiff for a full 10 seconds. The corner of his mouth slightly trembled as he said these words. Holographic projection? Nie Tian's face was full of surprise. He didn't know what the Sword Elder was talking about. Nie Tian, when did you get this ability? The Sword Elder didn't care about Nie Tian's doubts and nervously asked. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. Then he immediately told the Sword Elder what had happened before. The mysterious cauldron's divine sense and the divine sense have fused together. The Sword Elder was surprised and immediately said, "What about the 3-legged mysterious cauldron? Let me see." Nie Tian saw the Sword Elder's reaction and quickly took out the 3-legged mysterious cauldron. "This is..." The Sword Elder saw the 3-legged mysterious cauldron and his whole expression became stupid. He couldn't speak for a long time. Nie Tian was also stunned and stared blankly at the Sword Elder. Holographic mysterious cauldron. This is a holographic mysterious cauldron. After a while, the Sword Elder finally had a reaction. He directly shouted and his voice became sharp. Holographic mysterious cauldron? Nie Tian was stunned again. He clearly remembered that this was the 3-legged mysterious cauldron. "Brat, your luck is really off the charts. To actually be able to obtain the legendary holographic profound cauldron and even fuse with the holographic divine imprints. This dog's *T, luck truly makes one's hair stand on end." The Sword Elder was incomparably agitated. Even the tone of his voice had changed. Seeing the Sword Elder's reaction, Nie Tian's face slightly changed. His eyes revealed a hint of surprise. For the Sword Elder to be so surprised, it was definitely something good. The 3-legged profound cauldron seemed to be more terrifying than he had imagined. Nie Tian, this mysterious cauldron is called the holographic mysterious cauldron. According to the legends, it is a mysterious cauldron from the ancient times. The Sword Elder calmed down a little, but his voice was filled with excitement. A profound cauldron from the primordial era. Nie Tian couldn't help but be shocked. Very few warriors had heard of the immemorial era. It was an era even more ancient than the ancient era. It was also known as the Sage era. Generally, it only existed in ancient books and was almost a legend. Yes, the Sword Elder nodded heavily and said, The divine rune engraved on the holographic mysterious cauldron is called the holographic divine rune. It is a kind of divine rune that can perceive the heaven and earth and surpass the great Tao. According to the legends, those who have completely comprehended the holographic divine rune can perceive the entire world and contain the entire world in their mind and soul. Everything in the entire world can be perceived and projected in their mind. So abnormal? Tian was stunned. The blazing passion in his eyes was hard to describe. Perceiving the entire world and containing everything in their mind. Wasn't this the omniscient sage? Tian couldn't imagine how terrifying an existence of this level was. The holographic divine rune was indeed a very terrifying thing. Tian, you don't have much understanding of the holographic divine rune yet. Wait until you have more understanding, then you will know how terrifying the holographic divine rune is. The Sword Elder's eyes trembled as he said in a deep voice. In fact, he hadn't said the true horror of the holographic divine rune. According to the legends, those who have comprehended the holographic divine rune can not only contain the entire world in their mind, but they can also change the power of the world through the divine rune and change the great Tao of heaven and earth. When a sage is angry, the heavens and earth will collapse. This was definitely not as simple as the legends. The Sword Elder was afraid of scaring Tian, so he didn't say it out loud. I already know how terrifying the holographic divine rune is. Tian was stunned for a moment as he murmured. If not for the holographic divine rune, he wouldn't have been able to save Nie Yuro and Xiuling. His spiritual attack could be cast on several people at the same time. This was definitely related to the holographic divine rune. Moreover, the holographic divine rune allowed him to have the ability to project holographic images. This kind of perception could only be described as terrifying. Tian felt that the holographic projection was definitely more powerful than Jean de Bao's 3,000 seals of demons and gods. At this moment, as long as Tian's divine sense was activated, anything within 5,000 meters of him would be perfectly captured by him. If he had the ability to project holographic images earlier, he would definitely be able to sense the person who imprinted Mo Rushi's body. Imprint of a saint. Who did it? When Tian thought of this matter, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and a faint killing intent surged around him. Tian, the matter of the holographic divine rune is the biggest secret. You must not tell anyone. Also, do not reveal the holographic profound cauldron again. The Sword Elder warned Tian. If anyone else knew that the holographic profound cauldron was in Tian's hands, it would definitely bring him endless disaster. Tian nodded heavily. Unless he was a fool, he would not reveal the matter of the holographic divine rune. After understanding the horror of the holographic divine rune, the excitement in Tian's heart could be imagined. He didn't have much understanding of the holographic divine rune, but the holographic divine rune had fused with his divine sense. So his perception had a qualitative leap, and he even had the ability to project holographic images. In the future, I must properly comprehend the holographic divine rune. This thing is too abnormal. Tian murmured, his heart gradually calming down. Next, it was time to meet Li Yi. After recognizing each other as master and disciple, there was still no time to talk properly. A moment later, Tian appeared in the Li residence's main hall. Li Yi dismissed everyone, leaving only the master and disciple in the main hall. Teacher, Li Yi's face was moved. He knelt in front of Tian. Like a child, his eyes filled with tears. If this scene was seen by others, they would definitely laugh their teeth off. Li Yi was a peak expert of the Summer world, but he was actually crying in front of a young man. What a scandal. Tian knew that Li Yi must have been grieving in his heart all these years, so he didn't stop him. Li Yi was the one with the worst martial arts talent among his 9 disciples, but he was the one who made Tian feel the most at ease. Li Yi's thoughts were extremely meticulous, which made Tian feel at ease to hand over anything to him. After a long time, Li Yi finally regained his calm. His eyes were still wet, and he asked, "Teacher, what happened to you?" Chapter 10:27. In the main hall of the Li residence. Hearing Nye Tian ask about the others, Li Ye's gaze trembled, and he looked panicked. Nye Tian's gaze darkened, and his breathing became rapid. He had met Tong Fu before. He was the son of the seventh disciple, Tong Liao. At that time, Nye Tian had a bad premonition. If nothing major had happened, Tong Liao would not have allowed his son to wander into the 3,000 small worlds. Teacher, Li Ye's expression was slightly grave, and he said in a deep voice, "After you died, Luo Chenhun started to hunt down everyone related to you. More than half of the war god army was killed. Several senior brothers fought with Luo Chenhun, but they were defeated. Eldest senior brother sent ninth junior brother to the 3,000 small worlds. Where are the others?" Nye Tian's expression was gloomy. He had already seen Tang Hao, but he did not see the others. Li Ye's eyes were a little blurred, and his voice trembled slightly as he said, "In order to save the others, eldest senior brother and second senior brother fought a bloody battle with Luo Chenhun. Later on, the two of them were imprisoned in the purgatory of Horizon. The other senior brothers all escaped with injuries, and their whereabouts are unknown." Purgatory of Horizon. Hearing this name, Nye Tian's expression darkened again. Everyone in the day-night divine realm knew that the Purgatory of Horizon was an extremely dangerous place. It was a naturally formed prison. The purgatory burned with soul-refining fire all year round, and it could refine people's souls. Moreover, they would not die, and in the end, they would become puppets without consciousness. Luo Chenhun, how ruthless! Nye Tian's gaze trembled violently, and his whole body released a terrifying killing intent. His 9 great disciples had all made great contributions to the day-night divine realm. He did not expect that Luo Chenhun would not only kill them, but also torture them in such a way. Han Fei and Zhang Jianqing are imprisoned in the Horizon Purgatory, and there's no news of the others. Nye Tian's eyes flickered, and he blamed himself. He was the one who got everyone into trouble. Teacher, no news is good news. I believe the other senior brothers will be fine. Li knew that Nye Tian was blaming himself. After a long time, Nye Tian finally calmed down a lot, but the anger in his eyes did not disappear. "Li, did Han Fei send you to the Sumeru world?" Nye Tian looked at Li Yi and asked. Han Fei was the eldest disciple of Nye Tian and a swordsman. In his previous life, Han Fei's sword Dao accomplishments were already not low and was about to comprehend the profound meaning of the sword. Furthermore, his strength was also close to peak Heavenly Emperor. Nye Tian guessed that if it weren't for Han Fei and Zhang Jianqing, none of his disciples would have survived. Tang Hao was protected by Han Fei, which was why he could appear in the 3,000 lesser realms. Li Ye's appearance in the Sumeru world was probably because of Han Fei. No, Li shook his head. He suddenly thought of many things and said, "It was the limitless sword sage, Mo Qianjun, who saved me. He sent me to the Sumeru world and told me not to return to the Heaven Realm's God domain." Mo Qianjun. Nye Tian's gaze focused slightly. A face that he had not seen for a long time appeared in his mind. He could not help but smile and said, "Brother Mo, Nye Tian finally has a true friend." Teacher. At this moment, Li Yi said, "Jiao Qiansheng also protected many people in secret. I heard that Jiao Qiansheng even wanted to have a battle to the death with Luo Chenhun. However, this battle was stopped by the Snow Empress." Nye Tian nodded slightly. The limitless sword sage Mo Qianjun and the sword sovereign of the western region, Jiao Qiansheng, were his best friends. Mo Qianjun was a calm person, while Jiao Qiansheng was violent and impulsive. A battle to the death with Luo Chenhun was very much in line with Jiao Qiansheng's character. However, Luo Chenhun and Jiao Qiansheng were both peak Heavenly Emperor powerhouses. The battle between the two would definitely be earth-shattering. It was not easy for a peak Heavenly Emperor to appear in the Heaven Realm's God domain. It was reasonable for the Snow Empress to stop this battle. As the teacher and disciple spoke till here, the atmosphere became slightly heavy. The two looked at each other without saying anything. At this moment, Li suddenly thought of something and asked, "Teacher, are those two assassins from the Heaven Realm?" "Yes." Nie Tian nodded. Of course he knew that Li Yi was talking about Zhang Yuan and Ren Ren Hang. He said, "My identity has already been exposed. Luo Chunhun knows that I'm still alive. He will definitely send people to kill me again." So that's how it is. Lia's expression was a little gloomy. He had also sensed Nie Tian's sword intent before. It was not strange for that majestic sword chi to travel to the Heaven Realm. However, Nie Tian's expression was a little complicated. When the divine sword recognized him as its master, sword chi surged into the Heaven Realm. However, he was sure that there were only 4 people who could recognize him from the sword chi. Limitless Sword Saint Mo Qianjun, Sword Sovereign Jiu Qiansheng of the Western region, Sword Evil Dugu Ni of the Eastern region, and Sword Executioner Gue Hen of the North Sea. These 4 people were the pinnacle of the Heaven Realm's Sword Dao. Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng were Nie Tian's best friends. It was impossible for them to expose his whereabouts. There were only 2 suspicious people left, Dugu Ni and Gue Hen. Dugu Ni, Gue Hen. Who would the 2 of you be? Nie Tian murmured to himself. A cold light flashed across his eyes. He had a feeling that both Dugu Ni and Gue Hen were very likely to be related to the sage brand on Mo Rushi's body. "Teacher, what do you plan to do next?" At this time, Lie's eyes flashed with passion. Since Nie Tian had been reborn, it was time to pay with blood. Nie Tian would definitely lead them to the Heaven Realm's God Domain and the Day-Night Shrine. "I will head to the Heaven Realm's God Domain first. You should stay in the Shumi world. I have something I need you to do." Nie Tian thought for a moment and said solemnly, "What is it?" Li was slightly stunned. "War God Alliance." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he said these 3 words. He had previously established the War God Alliance. Although there were only 2 elders at the moment, he wanted to strengthen this force. In the following period of time, Nie Tian would head to the Heaven Realm's God Domain. The War God Alliance would be handed over to Li Yi. After giving Li Yi a simple explanation of the War God Alliance, Nie Tian said, "I will first make a trip to the 3,000 Lesser Worlds. Your junior brothers will also come to the Shumi world." Actually, there was another reason why Nie Tian returned to the 3,000 Lesser Worlds. He wanted to rescue Cher. He promised Cher that he would definitely let her out of that forbidden land. He had never forgotten this promise. "Teacher, don't worry. Li Yi will definitely not let you down." Li Yi nodded heavily. He would definitely strengthen the War God Alliance. Then, the master and disciple talked for a long time. Nie Tian only left after a long time. It had been more than 100 years, but Li Yi had not changed. This made Nie Tian feel sincerely comforted. After returning to his room, Nie Tian could not calm down for a long time. He already knew about Han Fei and Zhang Jianqing. The 2 of them were imprisoned in the Horizon Purgatory, enduring the burning of the soul refinement fire every day. Thinking of this, Nie Tian felt a stabbing pain in his heart. After a long time, Nie Tian finally calmed down. He told himself that he had to be calm. Now was not the time to be impatient. Only by being calm and improving his strength step by step could he possibly avenge the blood feud of his previous life. "Nie Tian, are you there?" At this moment, a clear voice came from outside the door. "Rushi." Nie Tian was slightly taken aback, and his expression stiffened. He knew that Mo Rushi was definitely here to ask him about what happened today. Chapter 1028. "You're from the Heaven Realm? You reincarnated?" In the room, Mo Rushi's small face was stunned. She looked at Nie Tian in extreme shock. Nie Tian nodded heavily. He had already told Mo Rushi his identity, but he didn't reveal too much detail. He just let Mo Rushi know that he was a reincarnated person. After Mo Rushi's expression stiffened for a long time, her delicate, pretty face finally relaxed a little. She murmured, "No wonder you didn't appear for 3 years. When you appeared again, you suddenly became so powerful." At this time, Mo Rushi recalled a lot of things and gradually figured it out. "Rushi, I didn't mean to hide it before. You won't blame me, right?" Nyetian took a step forward and gently embraced Mo Rushi with an apologetic look in his eyes. Of course not. Mo Rushi smiled faintly and said, I can't be more than happy to be able to marry an old monster from the heaven realm. Nyetian's face was full of black lines. He was only a little over 200 years old in his 2 lives, which was very young. The next morning, Nyetian woke up early. He had already made a decision to not delay any longer and immediately return to the 3,000 small worlds. Nyeyuro had not woken up yet, but her state was very stable. When the 1,000-gem illusory seal ends, she will naturally wake up. There was no need for Nyetian to worry. Teacher, this is a space-time scroll. Li walked over and handed a space-time scroll to Nyetian. Nyetian scanned it with his divine sense. It was a 7th-rank space-time scroll, which was enough to break the spatial barrier between the Sumeru world and the 3,000 small worlds. Let's go. Nyetian glanced at Mo Rushi and directly opened the space-time scroll. The space-time spirit array appeared, and the space suddenly trembled violently. Nyetian and Mo Rushi both entered the spirit array. As a dazzling light bloomed, the space shook again, and the 2 figures immediately disappeared. The next moment, Nyetian and Mo Rushi had already arrived in the void of the 3,000 small worlds. 3,000 small worlds, I'm back. Nyetian smiled faintly. He could clearly sense that the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the space was much thinner, completely incomparable to the Sumeru world. We're finally back. Mo Rushi was also a little excited. Nyetian and Mo Rushi did not return to Heaven Luo City. Instead, they went to Sumi's spiritual capital. Half a day later, the 2 of them appeared in the main hall of the Tang family. Tang Hao, Elder Yi, Gu Yi, Meng Fan Shun, Yang Kai, and the others heard that Nyetian had returned and came to the Tang family. Nyetian, your strength? When Gu Yi saw Nyetian, he immediately sensed his strength and let out a strange cry. At this moment, he was actually unable to sense Nyetian's strength. I'm already at level 9 of the Sky Human Realm, Nyetian said without hiding anything. 9th layer of the Heaven Realm. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, petrified. Nyetian had only gone to the Sumeru world for slightly more than a year, and he actually advanced 2 full realms. This kind of strength advancement speed was unimaginable. My strength is still at level 1 of the Heavenly Emperor. Before everyone could react, Mo Rushi suddenly spoke with a smug look. Tang Hao and the others were suddenly taken aback. Their eyes opened wide as they looked at Mo Rushi in astonishment. Nyetian, is what Miss Mo said true? Gu Yi swallowed a mouthful of saliva, his forehead full of cold sweat. Nyetian looked at Mo Rushi, who had a smug look on her face, and nodded slightly. This! Everyone was dumbstruck. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. After a moment, everyone calmed down, but their eyes were still filled with disbelief. They could imagine that Nyetian and Mo Rushi must have experienced a lot for their strength to advance so quickly. Next, Nyetian told everyone to enter the Sumeru world. Nyetian believed that after Tang Hao and the others entered the Sumeru world, Li Yi would arrange everything. After everyone conversed for a while, Gu Yi and the others left, leaving only Nyetian, Mo Rushi, and Tang Hao in the hall. Don't tell me that Lord Tang Hao is also your disciple? Mo Rushi could not help but be surprised when she saw Tang Hao's respectful attitude toward Nyetian, completely like a junior's etiquette. Nyetian nodded and smiled. Mo Rushi's little face was extremely shocked, and she could not react for a long time. At this time, she finally understood that Nyetian, a person who reincarnated in the Heaven Realm, must be extraordinary. 2 disciples, one was the strongest in the 3,000 lesser realms, and the other was the strongest in the Sumeru world. He can't have another disciple who is the strongest in the Heaven Realm's divine realm, right? Mo Rushi looked at Nyetian suspiciously and said in her heart. She was overthinking it, but Nyetian could be said to be one of the strongest in the Heaven Realm's divine realm. Tang Hao, you seem to have something to say? At this time, Tian could see that Tang Hao seemed to have something to say, but was hesitating. Teacher, it's about 13. Tang Hao hesitated for a moment, but still said, 13 and Tang Yuyu went to the chaotic abyss about half a year ago. Originally, 13 and I've been in contact, but 2 months ago, there was suddenly no news of them. I have a bad premonition in my heart, and I am worried that something has happened to them. Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu went to the chaotic abyss? Tian's eyes slightly focused and immediately understood. Tang 13 must be investigating the cause of his father Tang Duan's death, and Tang Yuyu was a member of the hidden soul clan of the demon realm, and was also brought here by Tang Duan from the chaotic abyss. He must also want to know about his own background. Tian was a little puzzled. How did Tang 13 enter the chaotic abyss? It should be that Tang Yuyu has a way to enter the chaotic abyss. Tian guessed in his heart, and a worried expression appeared on his face. He had heard Queen Medusa mention before that Tang Duan's death seemed to be related to the demon realm. The chaotic abyss was an ancient ruin, and within it was its own space and time. Not only was it connected to the 3,000 small worlds, but it was also connected to the 9 underworlds. If Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu went to the 9 underworlds to investigate Tang Duan's death, then it would be terrible. The 9 underworlds was a place that even the current Tian did not dare to casually enter. What was the last time Tang 13 contacted you? What was the scene? Tian asked in a deep voice. He knew that the ghost could transmit some scenes to each other, and it could ignore the barriers of space and time. It was a very abnormal ability. Teacher, look. Tang Hao's eyes flashed, and a light screen appeared in front of him. Tian looked at the light screen in front of him, and his eyebrows slightly wrinkled. It seemed to be a huge valley, and on both sides of the valley were stone walls that were tens of thousands of zhang tall. On the stone walls, there were some strange patterns. They were very strange, and seemed to be some kind of mysterious runes. Tian stared at those runes for a long time, and his expression gradually became complicated. He did not recognize these runes, but he could feel that these runes were very similar to the divine prints and sword prints in his body. It was very likely that they were some kind of elemental spirit force. Spirit force. This was a type of energy that was of a higher level than the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Chapter 10:29. Spirit strength. This should be some kind of spirit strength. Tian stared at the mysterious runes on the stone wall, his heart shaking. Although he didn't understand what kind of power spirit strength was, he could feel that the runes on the stone wall were spirit strength. After his divine sense fused with the holographic divine patterns, his perception was no longer the same as before. It had a qualitative improvement, and he had a special feeling for the same level of power. Tang Hao saw that Tian's expression was strange and complicated. He didn't dare to make a sound, and only stare at the latter blankly. Sword Elder, do you know what this power is? Tian couldn't help but disturb the Sword Elder again. The Sword Elder saw the runes on the stone wall and was stunned at first. Then he shook his head and said, "This should be some kind of spirit strength, but I can't see what it is exactly." Spirit strength was the same as the spiritual power of heaven and earth. It had many attributes. Even if the Sword Elder was an ancient antique, he couldn't know all the spirit strength. Tian was slightly disappointed, but he didn't care too much. He didn't know what the last image Tang 13 sent him meant, but he wasn't too worried. Instead, he felt that this might be a great opportunity for Tang 13. Tian let Tang Hao retract the image and said, "Tang Hao, I will go to the chaotic abyss next. Don't worry, with Tang 13's talent and perseverance, nothing will happen." Tang Hao nodded. Tang 13 was indeed his most beloved grandson, and he had high hopes for the latter. Tang Hao, gather the other juniors. You all go to the Sumeru world. Your strength will increase faster there. Li Yi will arrange everything for you. Tian said to Tang Hao. The Sumeru world's cultivation environment was much better than the 3,000 small worlds, so Tang Hao and the others didn't need to stay there. Tian had already told Li Yi about the 3,000 small worlds, and the latter would make arrangements for everyone. Then, Tian and Mo Rushi didn't stay in the Sumeru spirit capital and directly left for the chaotic abyss. A day later, the two figures appeared in the sky above the city of chaos. This is the place. Niet Tian sensed the surrounding space-time aura and quickly captured the aura of the chaos abyss. Mo Rushi had a strange look on her face. She did not feel anything unusual. At this moment, a ball of green liquid appeared on Niet Tian's palm, gradually turning into a small dark green dragon. Boom! With a light wave of his hand, the little green dragon soared up into the sky. A moment later, the void was struck by a powerful shockwave, directly tearing the space apart as a space-time gate appeared. Rushi, let's enter, said Niet Tian with a faint smile as he pointed at the spatial gate. Mo Rushi reacted, smiled sweetly, and entered the time-space gate with Niet Tian. When the two figures disappeared into the space-time gate, the space trembled slightly, and the space-time gate disappeared in an instant. In the next moment, the two of them appeared in the chaotic abyss. This is the chaotic abyss. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes couldn't help but flicker as she looked at the sand all around her. Niet Tian also furrowed his brows. The sand in the chaotic abyss seemed to be even fiercer than the last time he was here. The wind howled incessantly, and the yellow sand was like a tidal wave that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Fortunately, the two of them were very strong and did not fear the impact of this level of sand. Let's go to the Serpent People's territory first. Niet Tian planned to look for Queen Medusa first. Tang 13 and Tang Yu would definitely look for Queen Medusa as soon as they arrived at the chaotic abyss. After about half a day, Niet Tian and Mo Rushi arrived at the Serpent People's territory. Lord Niet Tian. As soon as they stepped into the Serpent People's territory, a familiar voice rang out. General Sha Qianling? Niet Tian saw the face and called out the person's name. The person who appeared in front of him was none other than the Serpent People general who had received him before, Sha Qianling. Niet Tian scanned him with his divine sense. Sha Qianlong's strength was at the 9th tier of the divine wheel. He still remembered that Sha Qianling was at the 5th tier of the divine wheel. At that time, he was already a terrifying expert. However, the current Sha Qianling could only be considered a small fry in front of Niet Tian. He couldn't even withstand his weak sword chi. Sha Qianling looked at Niet Tian with a strange expression. He seemed to be a little surprised, but he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he said, Lord Niet Tian, Her Majesty is already waiting for you in the main hall. Sha Qianling felt that Niet Tian had become stronger. As for how strong, he couldn't be sure. All right, I'll go see her now. Niet Tian smiled faintly. It seemed that Queen Medusa had sensed him when he first arrived at the chaotic abyss. Previously, this vicious woman had used the rising dragon formation to set a trap. He didn't know what she would do this time. Following that, Niet Tian and Mo Rushi were led by Sha Qianling to the main hall of the Serpentine Palace. Just as they arrived outside the main hall, an enraged voice rang out. Medusa, don't bargain with me. The Serpent People have survived until today because of our protection. I'll give you 3 days. If the Serpent People don't leave the land of wild sand after 3 days, you'll have to bear the consequences. A deep voice rang out from the main hall, showing the anger of the person who spoke. Niet Tian was slightly stunned. He frowned and asked, General Sha, who is this? Sha Qianlong's expression darkened. He let out a long sigh and said, He is the 3rd prince of the Thundercloud Empire, Murong Liang. Thundercloud Empire? Niet Tian was stunned again. He wanted to ask more questions, but Murong Liang's voice rang out again. Medusa, think about it carefully. I'll take my leave now. As the violent voice rang out, a burly man who looked like an iron tower walked out from the main hall. His aura was thick and dense, giving off an oppressive aura. Get out of my way. Murong Liang strode towards Niet Tian, emanating a wild aura. He gave Niet Tian a cold stare and let out an arrogant roar. Lord Niet Tian, let's go this way. Niet Tian's eyes darkened. Just as he was about to lash out, Sha Qianling hurriedly spoke up and gestured for Niet Tian to avoid Murong Liang. Niet Tian's gaze swept across Murong Liang and gently shook his head. He did not want to argue with the man too much. A bunch of ants. Murong Liang roared arrogantly and strode away. Yet Tian did not mind. He did not want to cause any unnecessary trouble. Nye Tian and Mo Rushi entered the main hall. Empress Medusa was sitting in the main hall. Her delicate and pretty face maintained a solemn expression, but Nye Tian could still see traces of panic in her eyes. "Mr. Nye Tian, you're finally back." Empress Medusa immediately stood up when she saw Nye Tian. Her sharp eyes swept across Nye Tian and revealed an unconcealable shock and surprise. "Nye Tian, you..." Empress Medusa's eyes trembled violently. The panic in her eyes was replaced by great shock. She was so emotional that she could not speak. Chapter 10:30. In the main hall of the Serpent Palace, Empress Medusa's shocked expression lasted for a few seconds before she finally calmed down. She suddenly sensed that Nye Tian's strength had actually reached the 9th layer of the sky human realm. She clearly remembered that when Nye Tian left the chaotic abyss, he had just stepped into the true energy realm. She did not expect that in just over 2 years, the latter's strength had increased by almost 3 whole realms. This kind of speed of improvement was too shocking. It was normal for Empress Medusa to be unable to accept it for a while. Fortunately, Empress Medusa's full attention was on Nye Tian. If she had sensed Mo Rushi's strength, she would have been even more shocked. After a while, Nye Tian waited for Empress Medusa to calm down before he said, "Your Majesty, I have come to the chaotic abyss this time because I have something to trouble you with." "Oh." Empress Medusa was slightly taken aback. Immediately after, her eyes flashed with a hint of passion, but she said, "Mr. Nye Tian, you know that this Empress will not help anyone easily." "I know that." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said directly, "Your Majesty, if you have any difficulties, please feel free to tell me." Murong Liang left in a rage just now, as if threatening Medusa, but the latter did not refute, so Nye Tian guessed that Empress Medusa must be in a very bad situation at the moment. Empress Medusa did not stand on ceremony and told him about the current predicament of the Naga tribe. It turned out that the Naga tribe now lived in the land of wild sand, which was the edge of the chaotic abyss, far away from the center. Not long ago, a rare mineral vein was discovered in the land of wild sand. When the people of the Thundercloud Empire heard about it, they requested the Naga tribe to leave the land of wild sand. However, the physique of the Naga tribe was very special. They had a sand attribute martial body, and they had lived in the land of wild sand for generations, so they had become dependent on it. If they left the land of wild sand, it was estimated that more than half of the Naga tribe would die. However, if the Naga tribe did not leave the land of wild sand, the people of the Thundercloud Empire would directly expel them. In that case, the casualties would only be worse. More importantly, the Thundercloud Empire was a huge force that the Naga tribe could not contend against. The Naga race was only equivalent to a great aristocratic family force in the 3,000 small worlds, while the Thundercloud Empire was equivalent to a peak force in the Sumeru world, or even stronger. The two were not on the same level at all. "You want me to help you resist the invasion of Thundercloud Empire?" Nye Tian smiled faintly, without the slightest hint of nervousness on his face. When Murong Liang left just now, Nye Tian had already sensed that the former was an expert in the 5th level of the sky human realm. The experts of the Naga tribe were mostly at the spirit wheel stage. Even Queen Medusa was only at the 1st level of the celestial being realm. Furthermore, she had only reached this level after absorbing the power of the destiny spirit ginseng. Nye Tian found it strange. The chaotic abyss's spiritual energy was very strong. Furthermore, it was an independent space that was not restricted by the lower planes restrictions. Why were the Naga race's cultivators so weak? Queen Medusa could tell what Nye Tian was thinking and could not help but sigh and say, "The land of wild sand is too close to the destiny forest. Under the suppression of the forest restriction, it is very difficult for the Naga race's cultivators to improve their strength." Nye Tian nodded and was somewhat speechless. The Naga race was restricted by the attribute of their martial body and could not leave the land of wild sand. In a land of wild sand, they were also suppressed by the forest restriction and could not improve their strength. This was really a dilemma. In that case, you also want to break the forest restriction, right? Nyetian asked with a smile. Of course. Queen Medusa's eyes flickered, but then she was disappointed. She said, the forest restriction is a terrifying restriction left from ancient times. Even if it has weakened after hundreds of thousands of years, it still requires at least a heavenly emperor realm cultivator to break it. Those powerful forces only care about their own interests. Why would they care about the Naga race's situation? Nyetian nodded solemnly. Queen Medusa's words were helpless, but it was the truth. Breaking the forest restriction was not only difficult, but also very risky. There was even a possibility of being devoured by the power of the restriction. The Naga race was a very weak race. Who would be willing to take the risk for such a race? The first time Nyetian came to the chaotic abyss, he knew that it was a very vast world. Its scope was as vast as the heaven world's deity realm. The land of wild sand and the destiny forest that they came into contact with were just the tip of the iceberg. Restrictions like the destiny forest could be found everywhere in the chaos abyss. The Naga race was just a small force at the edge of the chaotic abyss. It was basically equivalent to Moyang City in the 3,000 small worlds. It was not worth mentioning. Queen Medusa was powerless to resist the pressure from the Thundercloud Empire. Your Majesty, don't worry. I will help you deal with the Thundercloud Empire. Nyetian nodded and said, I want to know, did Tang 13 come and find you? Yes. Medusa already knew that Nyetian would ask her about Tang 13. She nodded and said, half a year ago, Tang 13 and a lady called Tang Yuyu suddenly came to the chaotic abyss. Tang Yuyu's aura was very strange. I think she was from the Hidden Soul clan. At that time, Tang 13 was already at the heavenly evolution realm. She asked me about Tang Duan's death. I told her that Tang Duan was being chased by a group of people from the 9 underworlds. Then, he went to find the entrance to the 9 underworlds. After that, there was no news of him. After that, Medusa asked again, did something happen to Tang 13? Nyetian shook his head. He did not know if anything happened to Tang 13. According to Medusa, Tang 13 should have gone deeper into the chaotic abyss. As for what happened after that, Queen Medusa had no way of knowing. After thinking for a while, Nyetian asked, Your Majesty, do you know where the entrance to the 9 underworlds is? I don't know. Medusa shook her head and said, I think the people from the Thundercloud Empire should know how to enter the 9 underworlds. All right. Nyetian nodded and thought to himself, looks like I need to go to the Thundercloud Empire. After that, Nyetian temporarily bid farewell to Queen Medusa. He wanted to go to the Destiny Woods. He would return within 3 days because Murong Liang had said that he would come to the land of wild sand 3 days later. Nyetian went to the Destiny Woods. Medusa asked Sha Qianlang to send them off. Half a day later, Nyetian rowed the sand boat to the outskirts of the Destiny Woods. Sha Qianlang and the others waited outside the woods while Nyetian and Imo Rushi entered the woods. Now that he had returned to the Heavenly Fate Woods, Nyetian's perception had improved to a whole new level, and he had a clearer understanding of how formidable the restrictive spells in the woods were. Cher, it's been 2 years. I wonder how you're doing? A beautiful face and a pair of eyes as clear as a baby's appeared in Nyetian's mind. He had promised Cher that he would break the restrictive spell and bring her out of this place. Chapter 1031. Destiny Forest, Rainbow Valley. In the valley, a several 100-meter-long serpent coiled around a boulder. There were 2 dragon horns on the serpent's head, and between the dragon horns was a sleeping bag. Inside the sleeping bag was a girl as beautiful as a goddess. The young girl was about 15 or 16 years old. Her skin was as white as snow. Her facial features were exquisite, and her body was exquisite. Every part of her was extremely beautiful, and when all of them were put together, it was a soul-stirring beauty. This young girl was none other than Cher. At this moment, Cher was hugging the snow fox called Little White. The corners of her mouth were slightly raised, and she seemed to be having a beautiful dream. All of a sudden, Schwerer woke up and exclaimed, "Tian, you're back." Hiss! Immediately, the snake was woken up by the scream and straightened its body warily. Cher woke up and sighed softly. She hugged the furry snow fox and said helplessly, "Little White, I had a dream again." "Oh, whoa." The mirage snow fox pouted as it responded. It was as though it was saying, "You're dreaming every day." A trace of disappointment flashed across Cher's eyes. She mumbled, "Tian has been gone for 722 days. Will he come back?" Hiss! Shy flicked her tongue and then turned her head away. She was saying, "That kid is lying to you. He won't come back." "Naughty Shy, don't talk nonsense." Cher knew what Shy was saying. She scolded, "Tian wouldn't lie to me. He will definitely come back." Hiss! Shy flicked her tongue again and shook her head helplessly. She turned her eyes away, as if she couldn't be bothered with Cher anymore. "Little White, I know that Tian will definitely come back. Don't you think so?" Schwerer glared at Bashful in annoyance. Soon after, she chuckled and looked at the image left behind in the phantom snow fox's eyes, only to see a young man's face becoming increasingly blurry. That was the image that Tian had left behind before he left. It was stored within the phantom snow fox's body and could exist for several years. The phantom snow fox was extremely intelligent, and it could understand Cher's words. It nodded its furry head. "Tian, you said that when the image in White E's eyes disappeared, you would come back. Now that the image is about to disappear, why aren't you back yet?" Cher looked at the gradually blurring shadow and murmured softly. Her eyes were warm and moist, as if they would flow out the next moment. A girl as pure as ice, a face as pure as ice, and tears as pure as ice. Any man who saw this scene would feel tender affection for her. Hiss! Just at this moment, Xiao seemed to have sensed something. Her gigantic body jerked as her eyes shone with a cold light. At the same time, two figures appeared outside the Rainbow Valley. They were Tian and Mo Rushi. "It's here." Tian pointed at the valley in front of him and smiled faintly. However, his heart was trembling inexplicably. He didn't know why, but he felt an inexplicable sense of panic, especially when Mo Rushi was right beside him. "That girl is called Cher, right?" Mo Rushi seemed to have sensed Tian's nervousness. She smiled sweetly and said, "She must be very beautiful. Otherwise, our Lord Tian wouldn't be so nervous." Tian smiled embarrassedly. He didn't expect Mo Rushi to still have the mood to tease him at this time. Hiss! The next moment, before Tian and Mo Rushi could enter the valley, a figure suddenly sprang out from the valley. A huge aura surged out and pressed down on Tian and Mo Rushi. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered, and she immediately became nervous. Xiao. Tian, on the other hand, sensed a familiar aura and cried out in surprise. The giant snake suddenly sprang out. Its slender eyes clearly saw the face in front of it, and its body suddenly froze in midair. Tian. At this time, another figure appeared. It was Cher. Cher shouted. Her clear eyes flickered, but her whole body seemed to have been petrified. Her hands trembled, and the phantom snow fox directly fell to the ground. In an instant, when she saw the face in front of her clearly, she couldn't react for a moment. Her head buzzed, and even her breathing stopped in an instant. Cher! Tian was stunned when he saw Cher. His eyes trembled. That soul-stirring beauty instantly made him lose his mind. Mo Rushi was also stunned when she saw Cher. She had already guessed that Cher must be a very beautiful girl, but she didn't expect her to be this beautiful. For a moment, Mo Rushi was a little dazed. Tian, you're finally back. After a few seconds of being frozen, Cher finally reacted. She ran over and threw herself into Tian's arms. For a moment, Tian couldn't react, and he only subconsciously hugged the girl in his arms. The two of them hugged for more than 10 seconds. At this time, Tian suddenly thought of something, and his eyes became flustered. Cough! Cough! At this time, 2 dry coughs sounded. It was Mo Rushi. Tian quickly let go, but Cher hugged his neck tightly. Her little face was pressed against his chest, as if she was afraid that he would run away. Cough! Cough! Rushi coughed again, and this time it was even louder. But Cher acted as if she didn't hear it at all, and she still hugged Nyetian tightly. Nyetian's face turned red, and his eyes were full of panic. He wanted to find a hole to hide in. Cher grew up alone. Except for some short contact with Nyetian and the others, she had never seen anyone else, so she didn't understand many things. She had waited for Nyetian for such a long time, and the latter really showed up. Of course, she couldn't control her excitement, so after hugging Nyetian, she didn't want to let go. Rushi, Nyetian blushed all the way to his ears. He wanted to explain, but didn't know how. He wanted to push Cher away, but he was even more embarrassed. Rushi looked at Nyetian's panicked face, but she burst into laughter. Seeing Rushi like this, Nyetian could only smile bitterly, but his smile was really uglier than crying. Finally, after a long time, Cher finally let go of Nyetian, but there were crystal tears in the corner of her eyes. She looked at Nyetian and said, "Nyetian, you're back, and we'll never be separated again, okay?" Nyetian's face suddenly turned red, and then he looked at Rushi, for fear that the latter would be angry. In fact, when Cher said that, she probably didn't even understand the meaning of the words, "never be separated again." Okay, just when Nyetian was extremely embarrassed, Rushi suddenly opened her mouth, as if she was answering for him. "Rushi, Cher is still young, Nyetian was panicked and even frightened. He thought that Rushi was angry, so he hurriedly explained. "Hey!" Before Nyetian finished his explanation, Cher suddenly screamed, and then looked at Rushi in surprise, and said loudly, "This sister is so beautiful." Chapter 1032. Nyetian looked at Rushi anxiously, fearing that the latter would be angry. Cher was an extremely simple-minded girl. She had lived a completely isolated life since she was young. Nyetian was the first man she had ever met, so unconsciously, he had a special meaning for her. Rushi rolled her eyes at Nyetian, then looked at the pure girl in front of her, smiled, and said, "Cher is more beautiful. Cher is not as beautiful as sister." Cher blinked her eyes and said seriously. Nyetian shook his head speechlessly, not knowing whether Cher was telling the truth or just being modest. Rushi glanced at Nyetian and didn't know what to say. Nyetian hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Shwe, let me introduce her to you. She's Rushi, my wife." Rushi. Cher pondered and said with envy, "Sister's name is so nice. It would be great if Cher had such a nice name." Rushi couldn't help but cover her mouth and laughed. "Cher is also nice." "Thank you, sister." Cher nodded with a smile and suddenly thought of something. She asked, "What is a wife?" Nyetian was stunned and didn't know how to explain. A wife is someone who will be with Nyetian forever. Rushi thought for a moment and nodded to explain. "Forever." Cher's beautiful eyes flickered, and she suddenly said, "Sister Rushi, Cher also wants to be a wife. Is that okay?" Hearing this, Nyetian's face suddenly changed, and his eyes were filled with panic. Rushi was stunned for a moment, but then she smiled and said, "Of course." Nyetian was stunned again and felt guilty. He didn't know whether Rushi was angry or not. All this while, he had treated Snow as a friend or even a younger sister. But now that he saw Snow again, he felt that something had changed. As for what exactly had changed, he couldn't say for sure. Yes. Cher suddenly looked at Rushi with her crystal-clear eyes, nodded heavily, and said very happily, "Then Cher and Big Sister Rushi will be wives together." "Okay." Rushi agreed with a smile and turned around to make a face at Nyetian. The two girls held hands and chatted as they walked into the valley. Yeah. At this time, a strange cry suddenly rang out. A snow-white figure flashed over and landed on Nyetian's shoulder. It was the phantom snow fox. Looking at the little fox, Nyetian couldn't help but let out a sorrowful sigh. "Brat, your luck with the ladies is beautiful." Suddenly, the sword elder's voice rang out. He actually laughed and said, "Rushi, Cher, One is more beautiful than the other, and that Rui Chinyu, I'm afraid she is also interested in you. Your Sai has caused tons of harm to all the men in the world. Sword Elder, don't make fun of me. Nietion's face darkened. The Sword Elder actually had nothing better to do and saw the whole scene just now, and even made fun of him. Make fun of you? Do you think this old man has nothing better to do? The Sword Elder said snappily, but then his face became serious and said, Nieton, this girl named Cher is not simple. Huh? What do you mean? Nietion was slightly surprised, not knowing what the Sword Elder was going to say. In fact, he already knew that Cher must be extraordinary. Previously, when he was seriously injured, a drop of Cher's blood directly healed him. What was even more strange was that Cher's blood was white. White blood, this was very rare. She is... The Sword Elder frowned, paused, and said, I can't tell you her current identity. I'm afraid it will scare you. Not saying? Nietion was stunned for a moment and said, if you don't want to say it, then forget it. He understood the Sword Elder's temper. If he didn't want to say something, then it was useless to ask. His heart was very strange. In the end, how terrifying was Cher's identity? Was it more terrifying than a saint's body and holographic divine runes? The Sword Elder no longer paid attention to Nietion and returned to the furnace of hell. In his heart, he was quite shocked. Just now, he didn't deliberately want to see the scene between Mo Rushi and Cher, but Cher's aura attracted him. Nietion, I'm afraid that Cher will bring you endless trouble. The Sword Elder sighed in his heart and couldn't help but shake his head. Regarding the Sword Elder's words, Nietion didn't take it too seriously. Since he had promised to bring Cher out of this place, he would definitely do it. Nietion entered the valley and found that Mo Rushi and Cher were chatting very happily. They were talking and laughing, as if they were long-lost sisters, and they had endless topics to talk about. As for him, he foolishly stood on the side, unable to interrupt at all. In the next 3 days, Mo Rushi and Cher were always together, and they were very intimate. Nietion, on the other hand, was busy. He checked the entire Destiny Forest, trying to find the weak point of the forest restriction. Although the forest restriction had existed for hundreds of thousands of years, it was still an ancient restriction, and it was very powerful. At this time, Nietion stood in the valley, closed his eyes, and quickly operated his divine sense. After a moment, beads of sweat oozed from his forehead, and in his mind, a huge holographic projection appeared. It was the holographic projection of the entire Destiny Forest. The entire Destiny Forest was about hundreds of kilometers in radius. Nietion used 3 days to walk through every place in the Destiny Forest, and then connected all the holographic projections together, sketching out the entire Destiny Forest holographic projection. Concentrate. The holographic divine rune consumes spiritual force. You will definitely be able to find the weak point of the Destiny Forest. In his divine sense, the Sword Elder's voice sounded, obviously encouraging Nietion. Nietion drew the holographic projection of the entire Destiny Forest, precisely to find the weak point of the forest restriction. It's these 4 places. After a moment, Nietion's face showed a touch of surprise, and he shouted excitedly. At this time, on the holographic projection of the forest restriction, 4 flashing light spots appeared. They were the 4 weak points that Nietion had found. The forest restriction is too strong, and the range is too large. At this time, the Sword Elder looked at the 4 flashing light spots and said, in order to break the forest restriction, we need 4 Heavenly Emperor Realm powerhouses to attack the 4 weak points of the forest restriction at the same time. As long as the 4 of them cooperate well, we can break the restriction. 4 Heavenly Emperor Realm powerhouses. Nietion's eyes trembled slightly, and he cried out involuntarily. He did not expect the force restriction to be so strong. After finding the weak points, it still required 4 Heavenly Emperor Realm powerhouses to break the restriction at the same time. For Heavenly Emperor Realm powerhouses, where was he going to find them? Mo Rushi had the strength of a Heavenly Emperor, and Nietion himself could barely be considered. But there were still 2 more. Where was he going to find them? There were not many Heavenly Emperor realm powerhouses to begin with, and in this chaotic abyss, it was even harder to find them. And yet Tion frowned, his face full of worry. Woo! At this moment, the sound of a horn rang out from afar. Chapter 1033. In the seven-colored valley, Tion was still thinking about the restrictive spell in the secluded woods when the distant sound of a bugle suddenly echoed out, causing his expression to flicker. This is the sound of Sha Qianlong's rhinoceros horn. Something must have happened to the Naga tribe. Tion's heart sank. He suddenly remembered that it was already the third day. The people from the Thundercloud Empire must have arrived at the Naga tribe's territory. Rushi, Tion's figure flashed and appeared in a cave in the canyon. Mo Rushi and Cher were chatting happily. Tion, what's wrong? Mo Rushi saw Tion suddenly appear and seemed to be in a panic. She couldn't help but frown. Something must have happened to the Naga tribe. I need to make a trip back. Tion said anxiously. You're leaving again? Upon hearing that Tion was going to leave, Shui-Er's petite face stiffened, and a sparkling light appeared in her eyes. Rushi, you stay here and keep Snow company. I'll be back as soon as I'm done with my business. With these words, Tion turned and left. Mo Rushi saw that Tion had left. She couldn't just leave Cher alone. She could only stay behind. A moment later, Tion appeared outside the Destiny secluded woods. Sha Qianlang was waiting for him on a sandboat. General Sha, what happened? Tion jumped onto the sandboat. Sha Qianlang immediately started the sandboat. At the same time, he said, Lord Tion, Her Majesty sent a distress signal. I'm afraid the people from the Thundercloud Empire have already arrived at the Snake Palace. Let's go back quickly. Tion's face sank. He had been busy with the secluded woods restriction for the past few days. He had forgotten about the Naga tribe. He hoped that Queen Medusa would be fine by the time he arrived. At the same time, outside the Snake Palace's main hall, several black-clothed cultivators appeared in the air. Each of them had a powerful aura, releasing a vast and mighty aura. Dark clouds appeared behind them. The surrounding area was shrouded by these dark clouds, causing the entire area to turn dark. Medusa, I did not see the Nagas leave. Does this mean that you intend to rebel against the Lei Yin Empire? Murong Liang asked coldly. His eyes were cold. Medusa stood outside the main hall with a panicked expression on her delicate face. She took a deep breath and calmed down a little before saying, Your Highness, do you want to exterminate the serpentine race for a mirror or vein? Medusa, the mineral vein in the wild sandland, is something this king has his eyes on. Anything this king has his eyes on, he must obtain. A sinister smile hung on the corners of Murong Liang's lips as he replied icily, I've already given you 3 days to move the Naga tribe out of the wild sandlands. You're the one who refuses to move, so don't blame me for what happens next. Murong Liang, Medusa's eyes flickered. She never thought that the third prince of the Lei Yin Empire would be so shameless. Actually, the mineral vein in the wild sandlands was not a precious mineral vein. Even if it was excavated, it would at most be used to refine a few more spirit pills and spiritual weapons. However, to the Naga tribe, the wild sandlands was a place where they had lived for generations. Murong Liang had destroyed the Naga tribe's territory for his own selfish desires. It was obvious how vicious his heart was. Medusa, I've already shown you the way. You're the one who refuses to take it. Don't blame me for being ruthless. As Murong Liang spoke, a cold light suddenly shot out from his eyes. Murderous intent rose from his entire body as he pointed at Medusa and roared, Kill her! Yes. The few black-robed men behind Murong Liang responded in unison. Their aura burst into the sky and merged into one. A huge dark cloud formed in the void and whizzed out, pressing down on Empress Medusa. Empress Medusa was only in the first layer of the celestial realm, while the warriors in the sky were all in the third layer of the celestial realm. Any one of them could kill her in an instant, let alone all of them attacking at the same time. Murong Liang, I'm going to kill you. Medusa felt a huge pressure, but there was no fear in her eyes. Instead, there was anger. She shouted and struck out with her palm. However, she was unable to unleash any aura. Under the pressure of a group of warriors in the third layer of the celestial realm, she could not unleash any of her power at all. And Murong Liang saw that Medusa still dared to resist and sneered disdainfully. Medusa's eyes flickered, showing extreme reluctance. She was too weak and could not fight back at all. She hated herself for being too weak and unable to protect the safety of her people and the territory that had been passed down for generations. At that moment, Medusa's heart was filled with despair. She could not help but close her eyes and wait for death to come. Who dares to hurt her? At the moment of life and death, an angry roar was heard. Then, the sky trembled violently, and a huge sword aura flew over. The sword aura was shocking and powerful. It was thousands of meters long and had the power to tear the sky and earth apart. It could almost destroy everything. When the warriors in black saw the huge sword shadow slashing down from the sky, their eyes trembled violently, and their expressions were extremely shocked. Boom! In the next moment, the huge sword aura fell. The majestic power shook the sky and destroyed all the dark clouds in an instant. The warriors in black were drowned by the sword will and turned into a bloody light. Nyetian killed all the people who attacked with one strike. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I'm late. Tens of thousands of meters away, Nyetian's voice was heard. He arrived in the blink of an eye and stood in the sky like a sharp sword. Nyetian. Medusa was already in despair, but she suddenly felt a sword will appear. When she opened her eyes again, the warriors in black were gone, and the person who appeared before her was Nyetian. Luckily, I'm not too late. Seeing that Medusa was fine, Nyetian smiled faintly and said, Your Majesty, leave the rest to me. Immediately after, a cold gleam flashed across Nyetian's eyes as he locked onto Murong Liang. At that moment, Murong Liang was in a daze as if he had lost his mind. He could not react at all. Only when a cold, murderous intent enveloped him did he come to his senses. He looked at Nyetian and said in shock, It's you. Of course, he still remembered Nyetian. Just 3 days ago, he was yelling at the latter arrogantly. However, Nyetian ignored him at that time. Murong Liang did not expect to see such a shocking scene when he stood here 3 days later. The people he brought were all in the third layer of the celestial realm, but they were all killed by Nyetian with one strike. Nyetian's strength was too terrifying, too terrifying. It's me. Nyetian smiled playfully and said, Tell me, third prince of the Thundercloud Empire, how do you want to die? He spoke calmly, but every word that entered Murong Liang's ears was like a sudden clap of thunder, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. Chapter 1034. Murong Liang stood in midair. His body swayed, and he almost fell to the ground. At that moment, his face was as pale as a sheet, like a frosted eggplant. He no longer had the arrogance from before. He never thought that the person he had shouted at a few days ago would possess such terrifying strength. Gulp. Murong Liang gulped, and his eyes flashed. He suddenly thought of something and shouted, I am the third prince of the Thundercloud Empire. You can't kill me. Can't kill you? Nyetian laughed, as if he had just heard a joke. His killing intent instantly engulfed Murong Liang like an invisible hand, wrapping him up. At that moment, if Nyetian wanted to, he could take Murong Liang's life with just a thought. Mr. Nyetian, don't kill him. Medusa cried out suddenly. She did not want Nyetian to kill Murong Liang. No matter what, Murong Liang was the third prince of the Thundercloud Empire. If he died in the wild Sandlands, the Thundercloud Empire would never forgive the Naga tribe. Your Majesty, I always thought you were a smart person. Why are you so muddle-headed now? Nyetian laughed. Of course, he knew what Medusa was thinking. He said, since the Naga tribe and the Thundercloud Empire are in conflict, no matter how big or small the conflict is, the Thundercloud Empire will not let it go so easily. So, whether I kill Murong Liang or not, the Thundercloud Empire will not allow the Naga tribe to continue existing. Medusa was stunned and her expression became awkward. She was a smart person and knew that what Nye Tian said was right. However, what choice did she have? Was she going to start a war with the Thundercloud Empire? To the Naga tribe, the Thundercloud Empire was a colossal existence. Rumor had it that they even had a heavenly emperor. Even if Nye Tian was willing to help the Naga tribe, it would still be a suicidal war. Medusa knew that Nye Tian was powerful, but he was only one person. Could he be more powerful than the entire Thundercloud Empire? Nye Tian shook his head and did not say anything else. He then turned his attention to Murong Liang and said, I heard that the Leian Empire has an entrance to the Devil Realm. Is that true? Empress Medusa had said before that there was an entrance to the Netherworld demonic realm in the Thundercloud Empire. Nye Tian wanted to confirm this matter. Otherwise, he would have killed Murong Yin long ago. You want to go to the Netherworld Devil World too? Murong Liang was stunned and lost his voice. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and flickered. Is there anyone else who wants to go to the 9 underworlds? Upon hearing Murong Liang's words, Nye Tian's first thought was Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu. The Thundercloud Empire was the closest empire to the Naga tribe. If Tang 13 wanted to go to the 9 underworlds, she would most likely go to the Thundercloud Empire first. I don't know. Murong Liang was terrified and shook his head subconsciously. You don't know? Nye Tian's voice deepened and an oppressive force was released. Murong Liang felt a huge force pressing down on him, almost crushing his body. I don't know their names. Murong Liang immediately yelled. They are a young man and a young woman. The man's eyes are strange, and the woman is a dual elemental martial artist. Upon hearing Murong Liang's words, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed again, and he asked coldly, How do you know all this? The two people Murong Liang was talking about were most likely Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu. However, how did he know that Tang 13's eyes were strange, and how did he know that Tang Yuyu was a dual elemental martial artist? Nye Tian had an ominous premonition, and his eyes couldn't help but turn gloomy. Murong Liang's face turned red as he felt the pressure from the even more intense aura. He could barely speak. Nye Tian's aura weakened, and he spoke coldly. Tell me the truth, don't lie. Yes. Murong Liang felt the pressure on him lessen and nodded. I've seen them fight against my brother, so I know their capabilities. I've also seen the power they unleashed. Brother? Nye Tian was slightly stunned, and his aura darkened. It was obvious that he was suppressing his anger as he spoke coldly. What happened? Speak clearly. Murong Liang felt the murderous intent and no longer dared to hide anything. He told him everything. After Nye Tian heard this, his anger grew even stronger and his eyes were filled with a terrifying, violent aura. It turned out that after Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu entered the kingdom of thunderclouds, they ran into the second prince, Murong Zhao. Murong Zhao was attracted by Tang Yuyu's beauty and had ulterior motives. He wanted to take her for himself, but Tang 13 was unwilling. Thus, a bloody battle ensued. When did this happen? Nye Tian suppressed his anger and asked coldly. 3 months ago, Murong Liang replied in a trembling voice. His face was pale from fear. Nye Tian frowned. Tang 13 had contacted Tang Hao 2 months ago, which meant that he did not die in Murong Zhao's hands. Where are they now? Nye Tian asked with a grim expression. They wanted to go to the Devil Realm and barged into the forbidden land of thunderclouds, wind, and Thunder Valley. They died in the valley, Murong Liang said as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Nye Tian was taken aback, and his eyes went wide. Dead. They entered the Wind and Thunder Valley willingly. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Murong Liang could tell that the silver-haired martial artist had a special relationship with those two, so he could not speak carelessly. Bullsh *T. Nye Tian raised his head and roared at Murong Liang. The coldness in his eyes intensified, and he said coldly, Do you think I'll believe your nonsense? As soon as the cold voice rang out, a terrifying aura exploded in the air. Murong Liang instantly felt a great pressure pressing down on him from all directions, as if it was trying to crush him alive. The bones in his body began to crack. In the next moment, a heart-wrenching scream was heard. Murong Liang's entire body was deformed from the pressure, and his face was contorted from the immense pain. "Speak, what happened?" Nie Tian did not kill Murong Liang right away. Instead, he roared again. Before he could clarify the situation, Murong Liang could not die. I'll speak. Murong Liang screamed and used all his strength to speak. Second brother chased after them and forced them into the wind and thunder valley. Second brother really did it himself. It has nothing to do with me. After witnessing Nie Tian's methods, Murong Liang knew how terrifying Nie Tian could be. He did not dare to lie. "Bastard!" Nie Tian roared, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. A ray of sword intent shot out and destroyed Murong Liang's vitality meridian. With his vitality meridian destroyed, Murong Liang screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Medusa's face darkened when she saw this. She knew that things were going to get troublesome. Chapter 1035. Nie Tian, you're going to the Thundercloud Empire? Medusa's beautiful eyes widened when she saw Nie Tian carrying Murong Liang in his arms. She never thought that Nie Tian would bring the half-dead Murong Liang to the Lei Empire. Wasn't that suicide? Even though Nie Tian's strength had reached the 9th layer of the Heaven Realm, there were still heavenly emperors in the Lei Empire. Nie Tian, don't be rash. Tang 13 might not be in trouble. We need to plan this carefully. Medusa said anxiously when she saw Nie Tian's stern expression. Don't worry, I'll be back. Nie Tianling said coldly. His expression was terrifyingly calm. He then moved and left. Medusa stared at the disappearing figure in the sky, unable to react for a long time. Nie Tian carried Murong Liang to the Lei Empire and said, I'll be back. Medusa didn't know whether she should laugh or cry. Lei Empire, Lei City. A figure appeared in the sky, emitting a powerful aura. The sword intent around him was sharp and murderous, as if it was going to tear the heavens and earth apart. In the blink of an eye, the figure moved and landed in the sky above a luxurious mansion. Is this the place? Nie Tian said coldly as he carried Murong Liang in his hand. His eyes were so dark that it was suffocating. Murong Liang's yuan meridians were destroyed. He was on the verge of death. He nodded weakly. Nie Tian looked down at the luxurious mansion below him. This was the mansion of the second prince of the Lei Empire, Prince Zhao's mansion. At that moment, many people on the ground felt a huge pressure. They raised their heads and saw Nie Tian. What a terrifying aura! The hearts of the crowd trembled. The person high up in the sky was like a sharp sword, standing there. A huge sword intent filled the space within a few thousand meters around him. Who is this? It looks like he's going to cause trouble for Prince Zhao's mansion. The crowd could feel the person's anger, and their eyes trembled again. Murong Zhao, get out here. At that moment, an enraged roar was heard. Like a sudden clap of thunder, it reverberated through the void. What an arrogant person. He actually asked Prince Zhao to come out. The eyes of the crowd froze, revealing a terrified expression. They didn't expect the newcomer to be so insolent and actually start a clamor. As the second prince of Thundercloud Empire, Murong Zhao had a domineering reputation in Thundercloud City. No one dared to provoke him. Furthermore, Murong Zhao was the infamous prince of Thundercloud City. None of the girls that he fancied could escape. Murong Zhao must have done something to this man's woman, and now he's here. The crowd guessed as their hearts trembled. Everyone's eyes emitted a strange glow, and they were already prepared to watch a great show. Boom! In the next moment, a violent aura suddenly rose from within King Zhao's manor. Dozens of black-clothed martial artists soared into the sky and directly surrounded Nie Tian. How dare you? The leader of the group glanced at Nie Tian. His eyes flashed with ruthlessness as he spoke in a cold tone. However, just as the man opened his mouth, he was interrupted by Nie Tian. A sharp aura whistled through the air. Get lost! You're courting death. The man's eyes froze, and he roared. Then he saw something flying toward him. Without hesitation, he threw a palm at it. Bang! With a loud explosion, a round object fell from the sky and landed in the man's hand. Third prince. The man was stunned. He saw a bloody head in his hand, and the face was very familiar. It was the third prince, Murong Liang. It turned out that Nie Tian had just tossed Murong Liang over to him. I killed the third prince. The man held Murong Liang's head in his arms. His eyes were blank and filled with despair. He never thought that his opponent would toss a person over to him, and it was Murong Liang. Everyone else was stunned. They stared at the man with their mouths agape and eyes wide open in fear. The crowd's eyes froze when they saw this. Their faces were filled with shock. Not only was this man here to cause trouble for Murong Zhao, but he had also brought Murong Liang with him. Get lost. Standing in the air, Nie Tian didn't even spare a glance at the people around him. With a deep roar, an unrestrained aura surged out like raging waves, crashing over violently. The dozens of cultivators around him felt a huge pressure and were sent flying at the same time. They all spat out blood in the air. Hiss! When the crowd saw this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. This person's strength was too strong. Just the pressure of his aura was enough to seriously injure the guards of the Zhao King's mansion. It should be known that these people were all Heaven Realm warriors, and many of them were above the 5th tier of the Heaven Realm. Bastard! At this moment, an ice-cold voice rang out. Then, a figure soared into the sky and appeared in front of Nie Tian. The man was dressed in white. He was skinny and his face was slightly yellow. His clothes were untidy and his eyes were filled with cold, murderous intent. Prince Zhao, your highness. The crowd was shocked when they saw the man. It was the second prince of the Leyun kingdom, Murong Zhao. However, judging by Murong Zhao's appearance, he must have been in the middle of something and was interrupted by Nie Tian. Bastard, you ruined my business. Today I want you dead. Murong Zhao slowly shifted his gaze and a malicious glint flashed in his eyes. After that, he let out a roar and a dark cloud appeared behind him. It was like a terrifying whirlpool formed from wind and lightning, releasing a violent aura of wind and lightning. Bloodline of wind and thunder. The crowd screamed when they saw the vortex of wind and thunder behind Murong Zhao. Their faces were filled with shock. The reason why the Murong clan was able to rule over the Leyun kingdom was because of their powerful bloodline, the bloodline of wind and thunder. Nie Tian saw the vortex of wind and thunder behind Murong Zhao, and his eyes narrowed. The vortex was filled with a violent aura. It contained both the power of wind and thunder at the same time. The power of bloodline was already very rare. It was even rarer to see a bloodline that contained two kinds of power at the same time. From the aura of the vortex of wind and thunder, Nie Tian could tell that the bloodline of the Murong clan was more terrifying than the blood jade mystical sand of the Xian clan and the blood jade demonic lotus of the Yu clan. The power of your bloodline is very strong. It's a pity that your cultivation is too weak. You don't even have the right to make me draw my sword. Nie Tian glanced at Murong Zhao. His eyes were gloomy and his tone was so arrogant that it made people's hair stand on end. When the crowd heard what Nie Tian said, their eyes froze and their eyes became extremely strange. Murong Zhao used the power of his bloodline, and Nie Tian said that the former was not qualified to make him draw his sword. How arrogant and presumptuous was he? Bastard, you're courting death. Murong Zhao's eyes trembled and his body trembled. He could no longer control himself. Murderous intent rose around him, and the vortex of wind and thunder behind him became violent. A terrifying aura filled the air, and the chi of wind and thunder spread. Chapter 1036. Up in the sky, a terrifying thunderbolt whizzed down and turned into a long snake, charging towards Nie Tian. The crowd was shocked. Murong Zhao had used his bloodline power directly. Obviously, he was going to kill Nie Tian with one move. Go to hell. Murong Zhao was already angry after being interrupted by Nie Tian. Now that he was being looked down upon by his opponent, he was even more furious. At this moment, the bloodline power burst out. He was going to kill Nie Tian with one move. In the void, Nie Tianling sneered. A cold light flashed across his eyes. His body shook slightly, and a mighty thunderbolt power burst out. It was so mighty that it turned the space into a sea of thunderbolts. The moment the thunderbolts appeared, the crowd was stunned. The power was too terrifying. It was many times stronger than Murong Zhao's wind and thunderbolt whirlpool. Boom! In the next moment, Niet Tian did not hesitate. The thunderbolts became violent, and a giant thunderbolt dragon rolled out. The void was filled with thunderous explosions. The dragon's roar shook the heavens and the earth, and a terrifying destructive aura was released. Under countless gazes, the giant thunderbolt dragon crushed down like a mountain. It swallowed the small thunderbolt snake in the sky like a gale sweeping away fallen leaves. Nietion's thunderbolt power was condensed from the 9-star dragon vein. One could imagine how terrifying it was. Any thunderbolt power would be absolutely suppressed when facing the thunderbolt power. Then, a shrill scream was heard. Murong Zhao's figure was directly engulfed by the thunderbolt dragon. The surrounding thunderbolt power surged into his body and tore all the meridians in his body apart. When the thunderbolt power dissipated, Murong Zhao stood on the spot. His whole body was covered in blood, and his flesh was a mess. It was almost impossible to tell that he was human. With a casual move, Nietian directly injured Murong Zhao. The crowd looked at Murong Zhao in a daze. The entire place was dead silent. Murong Zhao used the bloodline power of wind and thunderbolt, but he was defeated, and he was defeated so easily and thoroughly. How is this possible? The crowd was shocked. They could no longer imagine how powerful Nietian was. Actually, Nietian did not use his full strength at all. Otherwise, Murong Zhao would have died without a corpse. He spared Murong Zhao's life so that Murong Zhao could bring him to the Thundercloud Forbidden Area, Wind Thunder Valley. The Murong family's bloodline power was very strong. Unfortunately, Murong Zhao was only at the 7th layer of the sky, human realm. He was unable to unleash the full power of the wind and lightning bloodline. Go! Nie Tianling let out a cold roar. He clenched his fist in the air and grabbed Murong Zhao. Let's go to Wind Thunder Valley. Before the crowd could react, Nie Tian's figure had already disappeared from their sight. Thunderstorm Valley. After a long while, the crowd finally reacted. Their hearts trembled violently. The Wind and Thunder Valley was the Thundercloud Forbidden Land, the Murong family's ancestral land. High up in the sky, Nietian's figure flew like a bolt of lightning and soon arrived on top of a mountain range. The Wind Thunder Valley is here, Murong Zhao said while trembling with fear. His face was as pale as paper as he pointed at a valley below. Nietian looked at the valley below him, and his eyes trembled slightly. He could feel an unusually violent power of wind and lightning from the valley. Humph! Suddenly, Nietian's lips curled into a cold smirk. He then tossed Murong Zhao down. No! Murong Zhao's body fell, and he exclaimed, "Crack!" However, at the next moment, a massive power of lightning shot out from the Wind Thunder Valley and killed Murong Zhao right away. What a powerful killing formation of wind and lightning. Nietian's eyes narrowed, and he was slightly surprised. Earlier on, he sensed that there was a powerful killing formation protecting the Wind Thunder Valley. That was why he asked Murong Zhao to test it out. Without hesitation, Nietian extended his spirit consciousness over, and a holographic projection of the Wind Thunder Valley appeared in his mind. He could see the entire killing formation clearly. The holographic projection was very frightening. Nietian could clearly see the distribution of the power of the formation on the killing formation. It was clear where it was strong and where it was weak. As long as he could create a holographic projection, he would be able to see through the formation cores of all the spirit formations. Let's break through from here. Soon, Nietian's eyes flickered. A sword absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand. Sword intent gushed out and merged with the power of the starry sky, sacred flame. Boom! At the next moment, Nietian moved and swooped down directly. The sword radiance opened the way, and a huge sword shadow bombarded the killing formation of wind and lightning. There was a loud bang in midair, and the whole valley shook violently. The surrounding stone walls seemed to be collapsing. At the moment when Nietion's sword shadow bombarded the killing formation of wind and lightning, a layer of power of wind and lightning surged above the valley. The outline of the whole formation was revealed. It was actually a huge snake entrenched above the wind thunder valley, guarding the forbidden area. Crack! At this time, a crisp sound was heard. A crack appeared on the killing formation of wind and lightning. Then, it split open like a spider web and a narrow gap appeared. Nietion reacted very quickly. His body flashed, and he entered the wind thunder valley directly. At the moment when he landed, the killing formation of wind and lightning started operating crazily. The terrifying power of the formation surged, and the gap on the killing formation was instantly closed. What a strong power of the formation! Nietion let out a long breath. The power of the killing formation of wind and lightning was very terrifying. It was definitely comparable to a Tier 9 spiritual array. Moreover, Nietion could sense that the killing formation of wind and lightning was incomplete. If it was a complete killing formation, he didn't know how powerful it would be. Fortunately, Nietion had the holographic divine pattern and could see the weakness of the killing formation. Otherwise, with his strength, it was impossible to break the killing formation. No wonder there was no one guarding the wind thunder valley. A killing formation of wind and lightning was even stronger than the protection of a heavenly emperor realm expert. At this time, Nietion started to observe the surrounding environment. He was in a huge valley, surrounded by mountains and precipices. It was actually a completely sealed valley. In the entire valley, a strange power of wind and lightning was surging. It was like a ferocious beast that was hibernating in the space and could go berserk at any time. Nietion saw huge statues erected at the outermost periphery of the valley. Each statue was several hundred meters tall, mighty and extraordinary, with a grand aura. Nietion's gaze swept the surroundings, but didn't discover anything suspicious. He seemed to have fallen into a hopeless situation, surrounded by mountains and precipices. There was no path in the surroundings at all. Nietion took a deep breath and slowly calmed down. His divine sense carefully sensed every place in the valley. Slowly, a holographic projection of the valley appeared in his mind. This time, it was even more detailed. Every tiny place could be seen very clearly. It's here. After a moment, Nietion's face revealed a hint of surprise. His gaze landed on a huge statue. He saw a layer of mysterious power surging above that statue. It was like a layer of faint water curtain circulating around the statue nonstop. It's the spirit flourishing force. Suddenly, Nietion's face stiffened. He sensed a strange aura from the statue. It was very terrifying. It was on the same level as the power of the sword pattern and divine pattern. Chapter 10:37. Nietion looked at the strange runes on the sculpture, his gaze trembling violently. In the scene that Tang 13 sent over at the end, the stone wall was engraved with this kind of runes, exactly the same. Looks like Tang 13 and Tang Yu indeed came to Wind Thunder Valley. It's just that I wonder how they are right now. Nietion forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart and muttered, "Amen." Right at this time, he suddenly raised his head and saw that above the valley, several black-clothed figures appeared. Each and every one of their auras was powerful, seething with rage. Crap, the Thundercloud Empire's powerhouses came. Nietion's gaze turned slightly intent. Even though he was inside Wind Thunder Valley, he could still perceive these people's terrifying strength. The person in the lead was a white-haired old man, his entire body's aura surging like wind and thunder. The surrounding space seemed to be changed by him, collapsing towards him. Second-level Heavenly Emperor. Nietion's divine sense swept over and actually discovered that that white-haired old man's strength was second-level Heavenly Emperor, while the two people beside him also had first-level Heavenly Emperor strength. If the Thundercloud Empire's people saw these three figures, they would definitely be shocked until their eyeballs popped out. These four people were the Thundercloud Empire's three strongest people, known as the Thundercloud Three Elders. The white-haired old man in the lead was precisely the Thundercloud Empire's ancestor, Murong Zhengqi, and the two people behind him were respectively the Thundercloud Empire's second ancestor and third ancestor. It was precisely these three brothers who joined hands to establish the Thundercloud Empire. The three people's ages were all over 800 years old, almost reaching the limit of their lifespans. The Thundercloud Empire's powerhouses are indeed terrifying. Yet Tian looked at these four people, his heart trembling slightly. He seriously did not expect that the Thundercloud Empire actually had so many heavenly Emperor Realm powerhouses. Big brother, that punk entered the ancestral land. When Thundercloud's second ancestor saw Tian's figure, he could not help crying out in surprise. Reckless brat, killed my Murong family's people and even dared to barge into the Murong family's ancestral land, courting death. Thundercloud's third ancestor roared angrily and actually rushed straight down towards Wind Thunder Valley. And when his figure landed, a crack actually automatically appeared in the Wind Thunder killing formation, letting him pass through. The Thundercloud Three Elders just learned everything. Not only did Tian kill the Thundercloud Empire's two princes, he even came to Wind Thunder Valley. This was clearly provoking the Thundercloud Empire. When Tian saw the three Thundercloud Patriarchs rushing down, his face couldn't help but turn grim. It seemed like the killing formation of Wind and Thunder had some sort of connection with the three of them, which was why it didn't hurt them. Stinking brat, this old man will tear you to pieces. Third Patriarch Thundercloud let out a furious roar, his face contorted. While he was still in midair, a vortex of wind and thunder appeared behind him. Immense power of wind and thunder rolled out, unleashing a terrifying power of thunder and lightning that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. The entire world was disturbed by the power of wind and lightning, and it seemed to instantly become violent. Tian narrowed his eyes. After that, a sea of lightning appeared behind him as a majestic aura soared into the skies. His entire body radiated a wild battle intent. The Thundercloud Third Ancestor was a heavenly Emperor Realm powerhouse, and the aura of his Wind Thunder Whirlpool was far from what Murong Zhao could compare with. The Wind Thunder bloodline was already an extremely terrifying bloodline power. Coupled with the heavenly Emperor Realm martial artist law power, the power that erupted instantly was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Roar! Yet Tian stomped on the ground and slashed out with his sword. The Sword Soul Realm combined the power of the three sword wills, in addition to the violent power of thunder and the blazing astral sacred flame, directly stirring up the power of heaven and earth, releasing a terrifying aura of death. Boom! A loud sound rang out as the thunder sword collided with the power of wind and thunder. Suddenly, the void trembled violently, and majestic waves of air exploded, slamming into the killing formation of wind and thunder. Heaven and earth trembled violently, and the surrounding space became extremely fragile, as if it was about to split open at any time. If it wasn't for the killing formation of wind and thunder, the surrounding mountains wouldn't have been able to withstand the impact of the waves of air and would have collapsed. At the moment when the ultimate attacks collided, Tian felt a huge pressure on his body, as if there was a mountain pressing down on his head, causing him to breathe heavily. PFFF. Tian's body crashed on the ground, his chest felt stuffy, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. On the other hand, the Thundercloud Third Ancestor retreated several steps by the impact of the waves of air, but his figure stabilized, not injured. Wounding Tian with one move, what appeared in the Thundercloud Third Ancestor's eyes was not delight, but tremendous shock and astonishment. That move just now, he went all out, not only using the power of heaven and earth laws, but also the power of wind and thunder bloodline. More importantly, he was still inside the killing formation of wind and thunder. Receiving the blessing of the killing formation, his power increased exponentially. However, It was under such circumstances that he actually didn't kill Nyation, and he didn't even seem to be heavily injured. This is impossible. The Thundercloud third ancestor's gaze trembled, his eyes strange. He couldn't imagine how a Deva realm martial artist could withstand his all-out attack. Nothing is impossible. Yeah, Tianling responded coldly, but he was slightly shocked in his heart. The Thundercloud third ancestor's strength exceeded his expectations, definitely much stronger than those few assassins from the Heaven Realm. Furthermore, with the power of bloodline and the power of the killing formation, he was even stronger than ordinary second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists, that was truly a layer of heaven and earth. When martial artists were at a low level, they could even jump a major realm to challenge. But reaching the Heavenly Emperor realm, being able to jump a minor realm, was already a super genius. The Thundercloud third ancestor only had the strength of a first-level Heavenly Emperor, but was comparable to a second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist. It was sufficient to show the terror of his combat prowess. Fortunately, the power of lightning within Nyatian's body had absolute suppressive power toward all thunder attribute powers. Otherwise, it would be very hard for him to block that attack just now. Die for me. The Thundercloud third ancestor's gaze trembled, thoroughly infuriated by Nyatian's arrogance. His entire body's aura released wildly, akin to a fiend god. Rumble. Another palm smacked down. A terrifying power of wind and thunder shot out from the horrifying wind and thunder vortex, but condensed into a terrifying tornado in the air, akin to a furious mad dragon, rumbling over toward Nyation. Nyatian's gaze trembled slightly. It seemed like the Thundercloud third ancestor already saw through that his power of lightning could suppress thunder attribute powers. Hence, what he unleashed this time was the wind attribute bloodline power. This Thundercloud third ancestor looked impulsive and furious, but was actually meticulous in his thoughts. It could be seen from the difference in his two attacks. 12 Heaven Slaying Sword Formation, activate. Nyation did not dare to be careless. All the sword intent in his body surged out frenziedly. 12 giant swords of light and shadow appeared around him, instantly converging. A sword rumbled out. An enormous sword shadow surged to the sky. Rumble. Another explosion sounded out in the void. A terrifying power wreaked havoc. Nyation gave a muffled groan, his figure retreating wildly several dozen steps, spewing out another mouthful of fresh blood. The Thundercloud third ancestor's strength was much stronger than his. If it were outside the wind thunder killing formation, Nyation could easily deal with this level of powerhouse. But inside the wind thunder killing formation, it was very strained. Stinking brat, your strength has astonished I. When the Thundercloud third ancestor saw that Nyation was still not dead, his eyes flickered a bit, releasing an even colder killing intent. Chapter 1038. In the Wind Thunder Valley, Ancestor Thundercloud and Second Ancestor Thundercloud landed and looked at Nyation at the same time, their eyes gleaming with malice. Not only did Nyation kill the Murong family's descendants, but he also trespassed into the Murong family's ancestral land. If the Thundercloud three elders did not exterminate him, where would the Thundercloud Empire's face be? Seeing the Thundercloud three elders appear at the same time, Nyation felt a mighty aura pressing down on him, and a stifling feeling actually arose in his chest. The Thundercloud three elders were all Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists and could use the power of heaven and earth laws, especially Ancestor Thundercloud, who was a second-level Heavenly Emperor powerhouse. His aura was even more domineering. This is going to be troublesome. Nyation's gaze flickered slightly, and he cried out inwardly. If it was the Thundercloud three elders alone, he could still fight. But with the three of them together, it was really hard for him to fight. Big brother, the thunder attribute power in this kid's body is very strong and very strange. It can actually suppress the power of thunder in the wind thunder vortex. If we can obtain this power, it will definitely greatly enhance the power of the wind thunder bloodline, and it might even improve our cultivation again. The Thundercloud three elders' sharp eyes gleamed, and they snickered. They actually wanted to obtain Nietion's power of thunder. Yeah, Ancestor Thundercloud nodded solemnly, his eyes gleaming with malice. The power in his body is indeed very strange. We are in the wind-thunder killing formation now, so we can use the power of the killing formation to devour his power of thunder. When he finished speaking, the three's eyes gleamed at the same time, revealing blazing desire. Ancestor Thundercloud could tell that if not for the fact that Nietion's power of thunder could suppress the wind-thunder bloodline, the latter absolutely could not block the attack of the Thundercloud three elders. Three old fellows, you guys really dare to dream. Nietion looked at the three in front of him and smiled coldly, quickly calming down. The power of thunder was indeed very terrifying. No wonder the Thundercloud three elders had designs on him. Second brother, third brother, you guys attack together and suppress him for me. Ancestor Lei Yun sneered and took a step back. Berserk wind and lightning energy was released from his body. A vortex of wind and lightning appeared, like a dark cloud, surging above his head. Nietion glanced at Patriarch Thundercloud and suddenly discovered that the latter was actually drawing on the power of the killing formation of wind and thunder. Kill! At that moment, second Patriarch Thundercloud and third Patriarch Thundercloud roared at the same time and attacked together. Two vortexes of wind and lightning appeared in the void, spinning rapidly and releasing extremely violent power of wind and lightning. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, the second ancestor and third ancestor attacked at the same time. Violent wind and thunder chi condensed into a vast aura that spread out. In the void, an invisible barrier appeared, enveloping Nietion. Nietion was startled for a moment, then immediately realized that these two people wanted to use a barrier to control him, and then use the power of the killing formation of wind and lightning to devour his lightning power. Don't even think about it. With a roar, Nietion's fighting spirit was wild, and his sword essence roared out. Before the wind and thunder formation arrived, he had already formed a barrier around him, the Forbidden Barren Boundary. The Forbidden Barren Boundary was one of the three major barriers in the AO sword skill. Nietion had once used this barrier to kill Long San, who had a 10,000-year-old ice soul. At this time, Nietion was going to use the Forbidden Barren Boundary to fight against the wind and thunder formation of the two elders. The reason why he didn't use the Shrouding Sky Totem was that the Shrouding Sky Totem couldn't integrate the power of lightning, so it couldn't suppress the opponent. The Forbidden Barren Boundary was condensed by sword essence, so Nietion could exert the power of the sword essence of lightning to the extreme. Boom! In the void, the two invisible barriers collided with each other. The void trembled violently, and a huge wave surged out. Suffering from a strong impact, Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud staggered at the same time and couldn't help but take a few steps back. Barrier! The two steadied their bodies, and their eyes froze as they exclaimed in unison. They didn't expect Nietion to also be able to launch a barrier, and the power of the barrier was even more terrifying than theirs. Bang! Just as the two were in a daze, an explosion sounded, and the wind and thunder formation collapsed directly. The Forbidden Barren Boundary spread out and enveloped Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud. Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud immediately reacted, but their eyes were filled with horror. The huge shock made their bodies tremble uncontrollably. In an instant, the first thing that came to their minds was that it was impossible. Nietion had actually broken through their barrier and trapped them in it. This was too strange. Second brother, third brother, Patriarch Thundercloud, who was in the sky, saw this scene and was also stunned. He shouted in panic, "God-piercing sword!" Just as his voice trailed off, Nietion's voice suddenly sounded. The sword essence all over his body gushed out, and his whole person seemed to have turned into a sharp sword, extremely sharp. As the sword stabbed out, the brilliance of the sword bloomed in the void. The sword radiance was dazzling, and the horrible sword shadow whistled out, sharp and cold. The Forbidden Barren Boundary trapped Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud. This was the best time for Nyetian to attack, and he certainly wouldn't miss it. Watch out! Second Patriarch Thundercloud and Third Patriarch Thundercloud reacted quickly. They shouted at the same time and then attacked at the same time. The two wind and thunder vortexes behind them surged with the power of wind and thunder, which merged in the air and formed a wind and thunder shield. Bang! The horrible sword shadow bombarded the wind and thunder shield, and dazzling electric sparks burst out. The space kept ringing with ear-piercing sounds, and it was extremely violent. In the Forbidden Barren boundary, Nyetian's strength was greatly improved, while the strength of Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud was greatly suppressed. Under such circumstances, the power of Nyetian's sword seemed extremely terrifying. Crack! The next moment, a cracking sound rang out, and a terrible crack appeared on the wind and thunder shield of Patriarch Thundercloud, and then it suddenly collapsed. Ark! The screams of the two overlapped, sounding even more mournful and ear-piercing. Two figures flew out, and two dripping bloodlines appeared in the air. Under the bombardment of the sharp sword intent, Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud's clothes were all torn, and several horrifying wounds appeared on their bodies. Blood spurted wildly, and blood flowed unceasingly. But the power of the sword intent was still a little lacking, and it couldn't annihilate the two. Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud were Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists after all, and with the two of them joining forces, the wind and thunder shield blocked most of the power of that sword. The two figures landed on the ground, and their eyes flickered with great horror, and their faces were as pale as paper. It was really a moment of life and death just now. If Nyetian's strength was a little stronger, they would already be two corpses. Nyetian's eyes flickered. The power of this sword was beyond his expectations. He didn't expect the Forbidden Barren boundary to suppress Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud so much. If he had known this earlier, he would have used a stronger sword move to exterminate Patriarch Thundercloud and Patriarch Thundercloud. But it was too late to regret at this time. He already had no chance to attack again. Stinking brat, you're dead for sure. High up in the sky, a furious voice sounded out. The wind and thunder vortex above Patriarch Thundercloud's head actually released a series of berserk power of wind and thunder, condensing into strange runes in the air, surging frenziedly. Following the surging of the wind and thunder runes, the wind and thunder killing array started revolving at breakneck speed. The array formation power, lurking in the space instantly, became berserk. Chapter 1039. Just as the wind and thunder runes surged, the killing formation of wind and thunder was activated. The entire killing formation was filled with the power of the formation and immediately became violet. Nyetian felt a terrifying power appear in the space, and his expression changed. Bang! In the next moment, the vast power of the formation pressed down, and the Forbidden Barren boundary was crushed under the huge impact. Nyetian's body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked up at Ancestor Lei Yun in the sky and saw the terrifying wind and thunder runes. His heart suddenly trembled, and he immediately understood. The wind and thunder runes released by Ancestor Lei Yun were very similar to the power of the killing formation of wind and thunder. Because of this, Ancestor Lei Yun could activate the power of the killing formation of wind and thunder. At this time, Nyetian already knew that the power of the bloodline of the three elders must have been obtained from the killing formation of wind and thunder. He guessed correctly. The power of the bloodline of wind and thunder was inherited from the killing formation of wind and thunder. More than 800 years ago, the three brothers accidentally found the killing formation of wind and thunder. They studied the power of the killing formation day and night, and finally inherited the power of the killing formation and formed the power of the bloodline. That was how the Thundercloud Empire was today. The three elders listed the Valley of Wind and Thunder as a forbidden area of the Thundercloud Empire. No one was allowed to enter, and only the most talented members of the Murong royal family had the opportunity to enter. Now that Nyetian had entered the Valley of Wind and Thunder, the three of them naturally wanted to kill him. What a powerful formation! Nyetian's eyes trembled violently. The power of the killing formation of wind and thunder was extremely terrifying, and it was not something he could contend with. He was able to enter the Valley of Wind and Thunder because he saw the weakness of the killing formation of wind and thunder. Now, he had no way to fight back against the power of the formation. Brat, don't struggle. If we absorb your power of thunder, maybe we'll be in a good mood and let you live. Ancestor Lei Yun's body surged with wind and thunder runes, allowing him to mobilize the power of the entire killing formation of wind and thunder. Nyetian's eyes were gloomy, and his body was burning with a desire to fight. He was not someone who would surrender easily. The wind and lightning runes around Ancestor Thundercloud were similar to the runes in Tang 13's image, but their auras were much weaker. At this moment, Nyetian's gaze suddenly landed on the statue behind him. There was a small black vortex at the center of the statue, and terrifying runes surged within it. Tang 13 entered the Wind Thunder Valley, but I can't see his shadow. Could he have entered a secret territory? Suddenly, an idea popped up in Nyetian's mind. His face suddenly changed as he stared at the black vortex above the statue. His eyes were blazing. He was wondering if the black vortex above the statue was a space-time gate that led to another space. It's very possible. The more Nyetian thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. He was almost certain of this idea. Brat, you'd better behave yourself. At this time, Ancestor Thundercloud roared, and the wind and lightning runes around it became increasingly violent. Suddenly, the power of the array formation surged over like a raging wave. In an instant, Nyetian felt a terrifying pressure coming from all directions. The space around him seemed to have solidified, making him unable to move. Break! Sensing that something was wrong, Nyetian roared. His entire body's aura shot up to the sky, and a violent force erupted. The surrounding space suddenly trembled, and then shook violently as if it was about to collapse. Ancestor Thundercloud's eyes darkened. He didn't think that Nyetian would dare to resist. Immediately, an even more terrifying power of the array pressed down, and the entire space became dark. Nyetian let out a muffled groan. He felt as if countless mountains were pressing down on him, making him unable to lift his head. In the next moment, something even more terrifying happened. Endless power of the array surged into his body. Like countless beasts, they crazily attacked his meridians. Nyetian felt as if his entire body was about to explode. The pain made him scream. Then he lost control of the power of thunder in his body. It kept gushing out and was swallowed by the power of the array around him. Bastard! Nyetian endured the pain and cursed. Ancestor Thundercloud was using the power of the array to force out his power of thunder, and then mercilessly swallowed it. Realizing this, Nyetian's face darkened. He struggled to resist, and a terrible sword momentum rose from his body. Boom! A loud sound rang out, and the void trembled. Then, an even more powerful force pressed down, directly suppressing the soaring sword momentum. Smelly brat, resist. The more you resist, the faster the power of thunder in your body will be lost. Ancestor Thundercloud laughed ferociously. The wind and thunder runes around him directly became violent, greedily swallowing the power of thunder in the array. At this moment, Nyetian's eyes were bloodshot, and his face was flushed red. However, he couldn't break through the pressure above his head. Ancestor Thundercloud activated the power of the wind and thunder killing array. Almost the entire killing array pressed down on Nyetian. It was impossible for him to break through the pressure. Nyetian was furious. His power of thunder was being swallowed by Ancestor Thundercloud. This feeling of losing power almost drove him crazy. Nyetian, calm down. At this time, the Sword Elder's voice sounded. There is a space-time gate in the statue next to you. Use the holographic divine glyphs to open it. Hearing the Sword Elder's voice, Nietion immediately calmed down. At this time, the more angry he was, the more useless it was. He had to be calm and collected. Sure enough, his guess was right. The black whirlpool above the statue was a space-time gate. Instantly calming down, Nietion spread out his divine sense, and his mental force poured into the black whirlpool. At this time, his yuan meridians were suppressed, but his mental force was not. The holographic divine glyphs could also be used normally. I must open the space-time gate. This is my only chance, Nietion said in his heart. If he couldn't open the space-time gate, it would be very difficult to leave this place alive. More importantly, Nietion believed that Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu were in another space connected to the space-time gate. To find these two, he must open the space-time gate. Ha ha ha! Ancestor Thundercloud saw that Nietion had suddenly calmed down and the latter had given up resisting. He suddenly laughed wildly and said, "Giving up resisting is the best choice. Let yourself suffer a little less. As long as I devour all the power of thunder in your body, I will leave your corpse intact. Big brother, then the two of us." Thundercloud's second and third ancestor had already recovered. Seeing Ancestor Thundercloud constantly devouring Nietion's power of thunder, their eyes widened. However, when they saw Ancestor Thundercloud's state of madness, they didn't dare to say anything more. Nietion didn't care about Ancestor Thundercloud at all. Letting the other devour a little power of thunder now was no harm. He, Nietion, would sooner or later devour this power back even more fiercely. Space-time gate, open, open for me. Nietion kept releasing holographic divine glyphs, attacking the black whirlpool above the statue again and again. Chapter 1040. Inside the Wind Thunder Valley, Nietion suffered the pressure of the killing formation. The lightning power in his body lost control, gushing out frenziedly. Ancestor Thundercloud devoured Nietion's lightning power nonstop. The aura all over his body rose wildly and actually faintly showed signs of breaking through to the third-level Heavenly Emperor realm. The lightning power was a lightning attribute power that was even stronger than his wind thunder bloodline. It could enhance the quality of his bloodline, letting his strength have a qualitative increase. The lightning power in his body leaked out frenziedly, but Nietion did not care. All of his attention was only focused on the black vortex above the statue. Following the continuous consumption of the holographic divine vestige, bean-sized beads of sweat seeped out on Nietion's forehead. His complexion became as pale as paper. His entire consciousness became somewhat blurry, as if he was going to faint. The spatial gate is about to open. Suddenly, Nietion roared in his heart. At this time, he absolutely could not give up and absolutely could not faint. In the middle of the black vortex, a depression formed, akin to a bottomless abyss. A horrifying aura was released, making people feel a chill run down their spine and tremble. "Stinking brat, your lightning power is pretty much devoured by me. It's time to send you on your way." Ancestor Thundercloud sensed that the lightning power in Nietion's body became very weak, almost unable to sense it anymore. He could not help smiling coldly, the corners of his mouth curling up with cold, killing intent. The lightning power devoured clean. There was already no need for Nietion to exist anymore. Ancestor Thundercloud was going to deal the killing blow. Rumble. Right at this time, a strange spiritual undulation suddenly came from the air. Following that, a ball of black light gushed out from that statue. In an instant, without enough time to blink, the black light directly enveloped Nietion. Immediately, another spiritual undulation reverberated out. The black light disappeared. Nietion's figure also disappeared along with it. Amen. Ancestor Thundercloud let out a cry of surprise, being dumbfounded by the scene in front of him, completely unaware of what happened. Second ancestor and third ancestor were directly dumbfounded on the spot, thoroughly petrified. "Big brother, where did that kid go?" Second ancestor and third ancestor came to their senses after a full 10 seconds, asking in astonishment. "Get lost. Ancestor Thundercloud angrily rebuked and landed next to the statue. He stared at it for a long time, but didn't find anything suspicious. There were strange runes surging on the statue. Unfortunately, Ancestor Thundercloud and the other two didn't have the perceptive ability to see through them. Bastard! Ancestor Thundercloud abruptly turned around and glared at the other two, cursing. Are you two trash? Why didn't you kill that brat just now? Second and third patriarchs looked at each other, feeling extremely wronged. Just now, Old Master Thundercloud was devouring Nietion's power of thunder. If they had tried to kill him, wouldn't he have killed them instead? The second patriarch stepped forward, not suspecting the statue, and said, Big brother, that kid must have escaped with the help of a space-time teleportation scroll. Ancestor Thundercloud calmed down a little, and a strange look flashed in his eyes. He smiled contemptuously and said, He's just an ant. So what if he ran away? Anyway, I've already devoured his power of thunder. If he dares to appear in the Thundercloud Empire again, I'll kill him with my own hands. Ancestor Thundercloud was very angry that he couldn't kill Nietion, but he thought that Nietion, who had lost his power of thunder, was no longer a threat and could only be regarded as a small fry. Ancestor Thundercloud checked the Wind Thunder Valley again and made sure that Nietion was no longer in the valley. He didn't stay any longer and directly left. As for second and third patriarchs, they stayed in the Wind Thunder Valley to cultivate. It could be said that they didn't obtain the power of thunder as a consolation. At the same time, in an alternate dimension, it was a long and narrow abyss with cliffs thousands of meters high on both sides and bottomless darkness below. Boom! At this time, a violent fluctuation suddenly came from the abyss, and then a mass of black light appeared out of thin air. The black light slowly dissipated, and a person actually appeared. It was Nietion. Nietion lay in the void. His face was as pale as a sheet, and his aura was weak. However, his consciousness was completely awake. The moment he opened his eyes, a voice appeared in his mind. Wind and thunder chasm. Wind and thunder chasm. Nietion's eyes trembled slightly, and his entire body stood up. Immediately, he took out a few spiritual pills and swallowed them. Finally, his complexion improved a little. Then, he began to examine his surroundings. When he saw the cliffs in front of him, his expression stiffened. That was clearly the last image that Tang 13 had transmitted to Tang Hao. Wind and thunder chasm. This is the place where Tang 13 last appeared. Nietion murmured to himself as he looked at the cliffs on both sides. Indeed, he saw strange patterns carved on the cliffs. They were the runes that he had seen in the image earlier. Feeling the runes in front of him at such a close distance, Nietion was even more certain that it was the power of spirit. The aura was very similar to his sword runes and divine veins. It was definitely on the same level of power. This is indeed some kind of power of spirit. At this time, Elder Sword's voice was heard. His eyes revealed a strong sense of awe. The cliffs on both sides of the cliffs were all engraved with the same type of runes, releasing a vast amount of mysterious power. Nietion looked around. He was in the middle of a long and narrow abyss. He could not see the end of it. It was hard to imagine how long this wind and thunder chasm was. Nietion spread out his divine sense to the fullest, but he could not detect the end of the chasm. Gulp! Nietion's throat moved, and he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He had only received a little bit of power from the sword runes and divine veins, and his strength had increased tremendously, especially the holographic divine veins, which gave him a terrifying sense of perception. If someone absorbed the runes on top of the wind and thunder chasm, how terrifying would that be? It was unimaginable. These runes are a little strange. It seems like they have been absorbed by someone. All that's left is an empty mark. At this time, Elder Sword's voice was heard. They have been absorbed by someone. Nietion froze. Using his divine sense, he realized that there was not much power left in the runes. It can't be. In the next second, he suddenly remembered something and a name popped up in his head. Tang 13. He had seen the last image. Tang 13 did come to this place. But the strange thing was, Tian did not see Tang 13's shadow. Just then, the wind and thunder chasm began to shake violently. It was as if a giant force was rushing out of the mountain. Almost at the same time, Tian felt an incomparably strong force coming from above his head. He froze and lifted his head to look at the sky. The next scene that appeared in front of him caused him to be stunned. His expression became sluggish, and even his breathing stopped. High up in the sky, an empty space formed by runes appeared. It was like an ocean that was suspended in midair. What was moving wasn't water, but terrifying runes. However, this wasn't the reason why Tian froze. The most shocking thing was that inside the ocean of runes, there were two silhouettes. Chapter 1041. Inside the wind and thunder chasm, Tian watched the scene above his head. His entire being froze, and it took him a while to react. Tang 13. Tang Yuyu. Seeing the two silhouettes in the sea of runes, Tian's eyes widened, and he shouted their names with joy. After he arrived at the wind and thunder chasm, his attention was focused on the two sides, and he didn't see what was happening in the sky. At this moment, Tian finally understood why all the runes in the world were empty. It was because they were all gathered in the sky and formed a sea of runes. In a flash, Tian arrived next to the sea of runes. He saw Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu lying in the middle of the sea of runes. Around them, the power of the runes surged and flowed into their bodies. They are absorbing the power of the runes. Seeing this, Tian's eyes widened and he screamed. These runes were all the spirit force. With such a large scale, it was hard to imagine how much power was contained within. If Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu absorb all of this power, how much more terrifying would their capabilities be? The peak of the Heaven Emperor realm or the immortal realm? Tian's heart was pounding and he almost couldn't stand. Back then, he only combined traces of the power of the sword symbol and the holographic symbol, and it was already a great help to his capabilities. Now that so many runes were being absorbed by Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu, how terrifying would they be when they wake up? It's hard to imagine. Tian was stunned and stood still for a long time. That can't be. At this time, the Sword Elder's voice rang out. The spirit strength is a power that surpasses the spiritual strength of the world. These runes indeed contain an enormous amount of power, but they are all of the same attribute. Even if they were to absorb all of it, it would be impossible for them to fuse together. It would only be a waste. What do you mean? Tian was stunned. You will know if you look carefully. The Sword Elder laughed and signaled Tian to observe carefully. Tian focused his gaze and locked on a Tang 13's body. Very quickly, he realized that even though the latter was continuously absorbing the power of the symbols, she was also continuously releasing them. It seemed like the speed at which she was releasing and the speed at which she was absorbing was in balance. It was as if she wasn't absorbing at all. Well, Tian was struck dumb. He didn't know what was going on. Elder Jin laughed and said, "Look at their strength. They're already at the first level of Heavenly Emperor. This is already their current limit. So, even if more runic power is placed in front of them, they won't have the fortune to enjoy it." I see. Tian gradually understood. Because the runes were of the same element, and a martial artist could not absorb too much spirit power of the same element at once. Tang 13 and Tang Yu could not absorb all the power of the runes. Understanding this, Tian's gaze couldn't help but become heated. He laughed and said, "Elder Jian, my body doesn't have this kind of element. Can I absorb a little?" "Of course you can." The Sword Elder laughed and gave a definite answer. Tian's throat moved. He suddenly thought of a question and asked, since they can no longer absorb the power of the runes, why haven't they woken up yet? The Sword Elder laughed again and said, "This is the first time they are absorbing the power of the runes. Their minds are under the impact of the power of the runes. Their mental energy is not strong enough, and their consciousness is in a coma. If no one wakes them up, they will never wake up." "I see." Tian nodded and asked, Why didn't I faint the first time I absorbed the holographic divine glyph? The holographic divine glyph is a type of mental energy. It won't affect your mind. The Sword Elder explained. He was a little impatient and said, "Hurry up and absorb the power of the runes." Okay, Nyetian nodded excitedly. If he could absorb the power of these runes, it would be the third element of the divine glyph that he could absorb. Before he absorbed the power of the runes, Nyetian's eyes flashed. Two waves of mental energy were released and bombarded Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu's consciousness. The two's bodies trembled slightly. Then a light breathing sound was heard, and they woke up at the same time. Tang 13, Tang Yuyu. The moment they woke up, the two of them shouted each other's names at the same time. They then stood up. Seeing that the other was fine, they were relieved. Cough, cough. Nyetian coughed twice. Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu finally noticed him. They looked over and shouted at the same time, Nyetian. The two of them didn't think they would see Nyetian here. They didn't know that they had been unconscious for 2 months. If Nyetian didn't show up, they would be unconscious forever. You two have absorbed enough power. Next, it's my turn. Nyetian faintly smiled and teased. Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu walked out of the ocean of runes. When they checked their capabilities, they froze. Nyetian didn't care about them. In a flash, he entered the ocean of runes. Wind and thunderglyph. In an instant, a loud voice echoed in his brain. Then, an infinite amount of power from the wind and thunder glyph rushed over. Like a tsunami, it rushed into Nyetian's limbs and meridians. What a terrifying power! Feeling the power of the wind and thunder glyph, Nyetian was in awe. Just then, the 9 dried-up dragon veins inside his body suddenly became violent. Like a desert welcoming a rainstorm, they crazily absorbed the power of the wind and thunder glyph. Waves of powerful runes melded into the 9 dragon veins. The originally weak power of thunder and lightning suddenly became powerful. Nyetian heard a dragon's roar inside his body that echoed throughout the 9-star dragon veins. The aura of the power of thunder and lightning has changed. Suddenly, Nyetian felt that as the wind and thunder glyph flowed into the dragon veins, the aura of the power of thunder and lightning in his body actually changed. This change was very weak, but it gave Nyetian a terrifying feeling. It was as if the power of thunder and lightning had become even stronger. After a long time, Nyetian felt that the 9 dragon veins were filled with the power of thunder and lightning. His aura started to skyrocket nonstop. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He immediately understood that he was going to break through the 9th level of heaven being and advance to the heavenly emperor realm. A huge surprise welled up in his heart. Nyetian immediately sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. He retracted his divine sense and entered a mysterious state. The wind and thunder glyph not only made the power of thunder and lightning in Nyetian's body reappear, but it also increased the power of thunder and lightning. It even made Nyetian break through the 9th level of heaven being and advance to the heavenly emperor realm. When Tang 13 and Tang Yu saw the aura around Nyetian's body skyrocketing, they knew that the latter was going to break through the realm. They immediately became nervous and did not even dare to breathe loudly. After a while, Nyetian's figure suddenly stood up. A sharp sword aura rushed into the sky and whistled above the horizon. A huge sword shadow rushed up to the sky. Outside the sword shadow, there was a layer of mysterious power. It was the power of rules. Chapter 1042. High up in the sky above the wind-thunder chasm, a figure stood in the void, like a sharp sword, sharp and incisive. Nyetian, you broke through to the heavenly emperor realm. Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu exclaimed in unison when they felt Nyetian's aura. Nyetian nodded lightly, his lips curling into a faint arc. He originally thought that he could only advance to the heavenly emperor realm after going to the heaven domain. He did not expect that after absorbing the wind-thunder divine pattern, he directly broke through to the heavenly emperor realm. The power of the wind-thunder divine pattern was even more terrifying than Nietian imagined. What was even stranger was that his dragon vein seemed to only absorb the lightning attribute divine pattern power and abandon the wind attribute divine pattern power. Since it did not absorb the wind attribute power, I'll call this power the lightning divine pattern then. Yet Tion muttered in his heart. He could feel that the lightning divine pattern and the wind thunder divine pattern were two different powers. The lightning divine pattern abandoned the wind attribute power and stimulated the lightning attribute power to the extreme. It seemed like in terms of attack power, it became even more terrifying. Nietian's figure moved slightly and came to Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu's side. Seeing that the two were fine, he was very happy. Tang 13, your ghost eye opened to the myriad calamity ghost eye. Nietian's divine sense moved, and he could not help but be shocked. Tang 13's ghost eye actually advanced again. You can tell. Tang 13 was stunned and even more shocked. He did not use the ghost eye and did not even release any eye power. Nietian could actually tell that it reached the myriad calamity ghost eye level. This was too strange. Nietian nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Impressive. From what I know, you might be the first person to open the myriad calamity ghost eye. Indeed impressive." Although Tang 13 did not use the ghost eye, Nietian's current perception was freakish. The holographic divine pattern allowed him to directly see a martial artist's innate ability. At this time, Nietian finally knew why Tang 13 could enter the Wind Thunder Valley, and how he could discover the Wind Thunder Chasm spatial door. It was definitely the myriad calamity ghost eye ability. The two of you are already at the Heavenly Emperor stage. Very good. Nietian smiled faintly. He immediately recalled that breaking the Netherwood's restrictive spell would require 4 Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists, including Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu. It was just right. Nietian looked around, and his gaze landed on the sea of runes. He really wanted to bring all the runes out, but it was clearly impossible. He was worried about Mo Rushi and Cher, so he didn't want to waste any more time and decided to leave immediately. The 3 of them descended from the sky and arrived at the Wind Thunder Heavenly Chasm. "Are you ready?" Tang 13 grinned and asked. Nietian knew that the latter was about to open another spatial gate. He couldn't help looking forward to it. He also wanted to see just how terrifying the Myriad Tribulation Ghost Eye was. Tang 13 closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, countless ghost blades could be seen in her eyes. It was extremely eerie. In the next moment, an enormous ball of ocular energy was unleashed, forming a sharp blade in the air. It was extremely sharp, as if it could tear through anything. What terrifying ocular energy! Nietian looked at the sharp blade made of ocular energy in the air and couldn't help but shudder. The aura of the sharp blade actually made him feel fearful. Crack! Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Tang 13 controlled the sharp blade made of ocular energy and slashed it across the void. After a crisp tearing sound, there was an extremely ear-piercing sound. The space was actually torn apart by the sharp blade made of ocular energy. Seeing this, Nietian couldn't help but gulp. This method was much more straightforward than using the holographic divine glyph. Done. Tang 13 used the sharp blade made of ocular energy to create a crack in space-time. She smiled faintly and said, Nietian couldn't wait any longer. His figure flashed, and he entered the crack in space-time. Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu followed suit. The 3 of them disappeared. Boom! Almost at the same time, a strange vibration spread out from the Wind Thunder Valley. The entire Wind Thunder Valley shook. Immediately, a ball of black light surged out from one of the statues. What happened? At this time, Second Ancestor Lei Yun and Third Ancestor Lei Yun, who were cultivating, were awakened. They stood up and screamed. The 2 of them stared at the ball of black light. When the black light dissipated, 3 figures appeared. First, Thunder and Rain Patriarchs were stunned. Then, when they saw Nietian's face clearly, they shouted at the same time, "Little brat, it's you." "Yes, it's me." Nietian smiled faintly, but his eyes were filled with cold, murderous light. He didn't expect that these 2 guys didn't leave. Instead, they were cultivating. Ha ha ha. The next moment, second ancestor Lei Yun suddenly laughed wildly. His face became ferocious. He said arrogantly, "Little brat, you escaped with the space-time formation. I didn't expect you to be so stupid as to come back. I really want to see if you still have the power of thunder in your body." Just now, second ancestor Lei Yun was upset because he didn't get the power of thunder from Nye Tian. Who would have thought that Nye Tian would come back? He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Although most of Nye Tian's power of thunder had been absorbed by ancestor Lei Yun, there would still be some left. For second ancestor Lei Yun, it was better to absorb a little than nothing. I have a lot of power of thunder. I'm afraid you can't eat it all. Nye Tianling smiled coldly. His whole body released his aura. A huge sea of thunder surged out from behind him. It was even more violent and terrifying than before. How? How is this possible? Second ancestor Lei Yun and third ancestor Lei Yun were stunned at the same time. Then they felt Nye Tian's aura, which was on a completely different level from before. Their expressions froze, and they were completely dumbfounded. Why your strength has advanced to the heavenly emperor realm? Third ancestor Lei Yun reacted immediately. His eyes were filled with terror, and his tongue kept spinning. It had only been a few hours since Nye Tian left Wind Thunder Valley. Before he left, he was at the 9th level of the sky being realm, and the power of thunder in his body had been completely devoured. But when he came back, his strength had actually reached the 1st level of the heavenly emperor realm. Not only had the power of thunder in his body recovered, but it had also become even more terrifying. That kind of aura alone was already unbearable for ancestor Lei Yun. The scene in front of them completely overturned their understanding of martial arts. What happened to Nye Tian in these few hours? Why did he become so terrifying? This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Who the hell are you? Second ancestor Lei Yun was extremely panicked. He was about to go crazy, and he screamed crazily. "The person who wants your life," Nye Tianling said coldly. His stern voice carried a chilling aura. "Second brother, let's attack together and kill him." Third ancestor Lei Yun, on the other hand, calmed down and roared. A vortex of wind and thunder appeared behind him, and his whole body's aura burst out. He actually wanted to fight with Nye Tian. "You overestimate yourself." Nye Tian looked at third ancestor Lei Yun, and a stern cold light flashed in his eyes. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly, and he suddenly took a step forward. In the sea of thunder behind him, a huge thunder dragon surged out. Chapter 1043. The moment Nye Tian took a step forward, the thunder dragon rolled out, and a terrifying aura spread out. It was like a majestic mountain descending. This was the second time Nye Tian used the power of thunder after he merged with the Thunder God's mark. The Thunder Dragon's aura was even more terrifying and powerful. A layer of mysterious and strange power circulated around its purple gold body. It was the power of the Thunder God's mark. Boom! The moment the Thunder Dragon rolled, the momentum of heaven and earth changed. The entire killing formation of wind and thunder trembled violently, as if it was about to be torn apart by a powerful force. The thunderous aura bloomed in the space, shaking the heaven and earth, annihilating and killing everything. Bang! The Thunder Dragon had not yet launched an attack, but the surging momentum was already too much for the Thundercloud third forefather to bear. With a loud explosion, the whirlpool of wind and thunder behind the Thundercloud third forefather collapsed. Immediately, a shrill scream sounded. The Thundercloud third forefather's body trembled, and he was sent flying. In an instant, he was engulfed by the mighty power of thunder, turned into a mass of blood light, and disappeared. Third brother. The bloody scene stunned the Thundercloud third forefather. Then he screamed in fear, and his eyes were full of fear. "You should die too," Nye Tianling said coldly. His eyes were extremely ruthless. The Thunder Dragon rolled in the air, and the Thundercloud third forefather followed in the Thundercloud third forefather's footsteps. They turned into a mass of blood light and disappeared. This was a world where martial arts were respected, and strength was always the strongest voice. If Nyetian did not have such strength, the Thundercloud, third forefather, would have killed him in a more cruel way. Tang 13 was stunned by the scene in front of her. She looked at Nyetian with trembling eyes, but she could not say a word. Tang Yu was also shocked, and his delicate face was twisted together. Neither of them had expected Nyetian's strength to be so terrifying that he could kill the Thundercloud, third forefather, in an instant. One should know that the Thundercloud, third forefather, and the Thundercloud, third forefather were warriors of the same level as Nyetian. Nyetian smiled faintly and did not say anything. He was extremely clear in his heart that the reason why he was able to kill Elder Lei and Elder Yun so easily was partly because his strength had increased. The lightning divine runes had caused a qualitative change in the power of thunderbolts, and the other important aspect was the suppression of power. Nyetian's power of lightning had an absolute suppressive effect on the wind-lightning bloodline. Coupled with the power of the lightning divine patterns, this suppression was simply destructive. Lei Yun and Lei Yun had obtained their wind-lightning bloodline from the wind-lightning killing formation. The wind-lightning killing formation's power had been greatly weakened by the wind-lightning divine inscription. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for Elder Lei and Elder Yun to have the strength to retaliate against Nyetian. After killing Elder Lei and Elder Yun, Nyetian's expression was as calm as usual. At this moment, he suddenly noticed that the black vortex above the huge statue had strangely disappeared. The black vortex is the entrance to the wind-lightning chasm. Why is it gone? Nyetian frowned, and his face was filled with confusion. It must be because you absorbed the wind-lightning divine patterns and disturbed the power of heaven and earth within the wind-lightning chasm. Time and space were affected. In addition to the ghost eye's destruction of time and space, the entrance disappeared. The Sword Elder's voice resounded. His tone was filled with regret. Nyetian shook his head and sighed. The wind-lightning chasm had extremely terrifying wind-lightning divine patterns. Now that the entrance had disappeared, it meant that no one could enter the wind-lightning chasm anymore. The reason why Tang 13 could use the myriad calamity ghost eyes to open the gate of time and space was because the gate of time and space existed. Now that the gate of time and space had disappeared, even if he had the blood moon ghost eyes, it would be useless. Not being able to enter the wind-lightning chasm again, Nyetian felt that it was a pity. However, he had no other choice. Let's go. Scanning the wind-lightning chasm and not finding anything noteworthy, Nyetian nodded slightly and prepared to leave. Follow me closely. Nyetian inclined his head and stared at the wind-lightning killing array above his head. His eyes flickered as he soared up into the air and pierced out with his sword. A resplendent sword light blossomed in the air, directly breaking a hole in the wind-lightning killing array. 3 silhouettes flickered as they dashed out from the killing array. Nyetian, I will make a trip to the Lightning Cloud Empire's Zhao Prince Palace. There are some things I need to settle. Tang 13's silhouette froze in midair as a strange light flashed in his eyes. A cold smile appeared on his face. There's no need to go. Nyetian faintly smiled. He naturally knew what Tang 13 wanted to do. Murong Zhao is already dead. He was the one who brought me to the wind-lightning chasm. Murong Zhao is dead. Tang 13 froze as a look of regret flashed in his eyes. He wanted nothing more than to kill Murong Zhao with his own hands. However, it was also because of Murong Zhao that he and Tang Yuyu were able to enter the wind-lightning chasm. Actually, up until now, Tang 13 still didn't know what kind of power the wind-lightning divine rune was. He only felt that it was extremely terrifying and was definitely not an ordinary power. Nyetian didn't explain too much to him. Tang 13's martial talent far surpassed Tang Hao's. He had his own path to walk. As long as he persevered, his future achievements would definitely not be low. You came to the chaotic abyss to find us. Tang 13 suddenly thought of something. He still didn't know why Nyetian would appear here. He only remembered that after he transmitted the scene of him entering the wind-lightning chasm to Tang Hao, he fell into a state of unconsciousness until Nie Tian appeared. You can say that. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. Although he didn't come here specifically for Tang 13, the latter was also the reason why he appeared here. If Cher wasn't here, Nie Tian would also come to the chaotic abyss for Tang 13. Nie Tian basically knew what happened to Tang 13. Tang 13 hadn't gone to the 9 underworlds yet, so he definitely hadn't investigated Tang Duan and Tang Yuyu. Let's go. Follow me to a place first. Nie Tian didn't ask too much. Instead, he smiled faintly, and a playful smile appeared on his face. Where are we going? Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu were both startled. The royal palace of the Thundercloud Empire. I'm going to find someone to settle the score with, Nie Tian replied. His silhouette flickered and turned into a ray of light as he flew away. Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu looked at each other and immediately followed. A moment later, in the royal palace of the Thundercloud Empire, 3 silhouettes descended from the sky. It was Nie Tian and the other 2. Ancestor Thundercloud, you've swallowed my power. Now it's time for you to pay me back. Nie Tian murmured softly. Then his gaze locked onto the majestic palace, and his entire body emitted a terrifying chi. Nie Tian, you aren't planning on destroying this palace, are you? Tang 13 felt the violent chi around Nie Tian and couldn't help but frown. She asked in surprise, What do you think? Nie Tian laughed. Then his body shook. Like an ocean, the chi of the sword rose up and covered the entire sky. At this moment, Nie Tian's silhouette and the chi of the sword merged into one. He was sharp and domineering. It was as if the entire heaven and earth were shaking along with him. Chapter 1044. In the sky above the majestic hall, a huge sword shadow rolled down, causing the surrounding void to tremble. At this time, the crowd on the ground suddenly felt a boundless pressure pressing down on their heads. They all looked up and saw the scene in the sky, and their eyes trembled violently. Rumble! Under countless gazes, the shadow of the sword fell down and landed on the palace. With a loud explosion, the entire palace collapsed. Dust rose tens of meters into the air. It was as if a sandstorm had taken place. The crowd suddenly screamed in panic and fled in all directions. Nie Tian looked at the scene on the ground with a calm expression. He had already sensed with his divine sense just now. There was only one aura in the entire hall, and it was an aura he was very familiar with. Ancestor Lei Yun. This hall was where the 3 elders of Lei Yun cultivated. Apart from the 3 of them, no one was allowed to approach. The other 2 elders had died in the Wind Thunder Valley, and at this moment, only Ancestor Lei Yun was in the hall. At this time, in the palace, countless figures rushed into the sky. Hundreds of people appeared in the sky, surrounding Nie Tian and the other 2. These people were the secret guards of the palace, responsible for the safety of the palace. Nie Tian destroyed a hall with one sword, and the huge movement almost alarmed all the secret guards of the palace. These people were all experts of the celestial realm, and many were even at the peak of the celestial realm. They appeared at the same time, and the pervasive momentum was very terrifying. But Nie Tian did not care at all. He did not even bother to look at these people. A chill flashed in his eyes, and he said in a deep voice, Listen up, this is between me and Ancestor Lei Yun. No one else is allowed to interfere, or there will only be one end, death. As the last word fell, a fierce and sharp voice resounded in the void, like a bolt of thunder, bombarding everyone's heart, making them feel an uncontrollable feeling of trembling. Before the voice died away, Nie Tian's whole body surged with a terrifying killing intent, like boundless ripples spreading out in the air. What a terrifying person! Everyone felt the terrible killing intent, a kind of bone-chilling coldness that went straight to the soul. Suddenly, their eyes trembled violently, and they almost subconsciously retreated, not daring to take even half a step closer. Nie Tian's killing intent almost condensed into a substance, and a vast and terrifying aura enveloped the entire sky. Everyone was trembling with fear, and their eyes were filled with terror. They could see that Nietion's words were not just a threat. If they dared to move, they would definitely die on the spot. An angry roar directly intimidated thousands of Imperial secret guards. Nietion's insolence made people's hair stand on end. Bastard! At this moment, a furious roar rang out. A figure shot up into the sky from the ruins of the palace. A terrifying aura spread out. It was actually a violent power of lightning. Ancestor Thundercloud. When Nietion saw that figure, his eyes trembled slightly, and his sharp killing intent was on the verge of bursting out. This figure was none other than Ancestor Thundercloud. When Nietion made his move, he was cultivating in the secret chamber, trying to assimilate the power of thunder he had devoured from Nietion, who knew that he would be interrupted by Nietion halfway through the fusion. Stinking brat, it's you. Ancestor Thundercloud's figure froze in midair. Seeing that the person who appeared in front of him was actually Nietion, he could not help crying out in surprise. Following that, he started laughing wildly. Little brat, I was careless for a moment and let him escape. You actually still dare to run back, really courting death. The cold voice faded. A tempest vortex appeared behind Ancestor Thundercloud. Under the dark clouds surging, the aura of thunder spread out. The surrounding several thousand meters of space was filled with a vast and mighty power of thunder. What a horrifying aura! Tang 13's strange eyes quivered slightly, and she said solemnly, "He's a third-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist." Not only did his ghost have terrifying ocular power, it also had very keen perception at the same time. Sensing Ancestor Thundercloud's strength, Tang 13's expression changed drastically, her eyes revealing a trace of terror. Third-level Heavenly Emperor cultivation. This strength was very horrifying. Heavenly Emperor realm. One level was a world apart. It was not the least bit exaggerated to say that the disparity between second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists and first-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists was even greater than the disparity between ninth-level Deva and first-level Deva. Under normal circumstances, a second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist could easily deal with 10 first-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. Ancestor Thundercloud's strength was third-level Heavenly Emperor, sufficient to easily insta-kill first-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. Devoured my power of thunder, and his strength advanced. Nietion swept a glance. What emerged in his eyes was not fear, but cold, killing intent. Ancestor Thundercloud forcefully devoured his power of thunder and even almost killed him. This enmity, this hatred, would not rest until he was dead. Amen. Ancestor Thundercloud looked at Nietion and suddenly sensed that the other party's aura was not right. His gaze could not help turning intent, and he was considerably surprised as he cried out, "Your strength became stronger?" Only at this time did Ancestor Thundercloud suddenly discover that Nietion's strength actually became stronger and actually advanced to the Heavenly Emperor realm. How is this possible? Ancestor Thundercloud's first reaction was that it was impossible. Nietion had his power of thunder devoured by him. It was already pretty good that his strength did not decline. How could he possibly advance? Furthermore, from 9th level Deva to 1st level Heavenly Emperor, although it was just a minor realm difference, the chasm within was as wide as the heavens and the earth. Many martial artists stopped at 9th level Deva for several hundred years and were unable to advance to the Heavenly Emperor realm. Nietion actually advanced to the Heavenly Emperor realm in just these few hours' time. If this kind of thing were to spread out, it would simply be universally shocking. But his perception would not be wrong. The aura all over Nietion's body became stronger. Heaven and earth law power surged all around him. This was clearly the hallmark of Heavenly Emperor realm. Ancestor Thundercloud. For me to be able to advance to the Heavenly Emperor realm so quickly, it's really all thanks to you. Nietionling smiled coldly, verbally thanking, but the killing intent in his eyes wished to tear Ancestor Thundercloud's corpse into 10,000 pieces. You're courting death. Ancestor Thundercloud's gaze flickered, then immediately calmed down, spitting out an icy cold voice. The wind and thunder vortex behind him became even more berserk. His face revealed a contemptuous look as he said, "Stinking brat, even if you advance to the Heavenly Emperor realm, you're still trash in front of this ancestor. The strength of a third-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist isn't what you can imagine." 4 Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists. Each time their strength increased by a level, their comprehension and control of heaven and earth law would strengthen a portion. The power of law that they could mobilize would also be more. First-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists' understanding of the power of law was not much in the first place. Moreover, Niet Tian had still just advanced to the Heavenly Emperor realm. Ancestor Thundercloud did not attach any importance to him in the slightest. "Is that so?" The corners of Niet Tian's mouth curled up, smiling cold. What surged all over his body was not fear, but a terrifying and wild fighting intent. Ancestor Thundercloud used a killing array to oppress him, devouring his power of lightning. This kind of hatred must be paid in blood. Courting death. Ancestor Thundercloud sensed Niet Tian's fighting intent and gave an angry cry. His figure suddenly moved. A berserk power of wind and thunder gushed out of the wind and thunder vortex, and actually turned into countless purple-gold lightning enormous snakes, crushing down toward Niet Tian fiercely. Chapter 1045. High up in the sky, Ancestor Thundercloud's move rumbled out. Heaven and earth trembled. Rumble. The power of lightning transformed into countless purple-gold giant snakes. In an instant, tens of thousands of snakes danced wildly. Vast and mighty lightning howled in the air. A stretch of sky was flooded with lightning. A terrifying sound reverberated in the air. "Be careful." Tang 13 felt a terrifying, destructive aura pressing over and could not help crying out in shock. But at this time, Niet Tian already made a move. His figure actually moved, stepping on the lightning colossal dragon, pouncing over toward Ancestor Thundercloud fiercely. Hiss! When the surrounding crowd saw this scene, they sucked in a cold breath in their hearts. Niet Tian actually chose to clash head-on with Ancestor Thundercloud. Fighting spirit. Everyone could clearly feel the surging fighting spirit on Niet Tian's body. That fearless determination in the latter's eyes made people's blood boil. The colossal dragon rolled out. Heaven and earth trembled violently. The momentum of heaven and earth was forcefully changed, stretched, and distorted. Heavenly Emperor realm strength mobilizing heaven and earth laws, coupled with the power of fusing lightning divine marks. Niet Tian's lightning colossal dragon was more than several times stronger than before. But the enemies he faced similarly became stronger too. Not only did Ancestor Thundercloud's cultivation increase, but most importantly, his wind and thunder bloodline also changed. Under the help of the power of lightning, Ancestor Thundercloud's wind and thunder bloodline had a qualitative improvement, becoming several times stronger than before. Rumble. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The next instant, under countless gazes, the lightning colossal dragon actually directly pressed over. Its enormous body was instantly entangled by countless purple-gold little snakes, wrapping around and wrapping around. Those little snakes were actually not small, several dozen meters long. But the lightning colossal dragon's body was too massive, over 1,000 meters in size. The little snakes twined around the colossal dragon's body like little bugs. "Ha ha! Stinking brat. I'll let you have a taste of 10,000 snakes devouring your body." Ancestor Thundercloud laughed savagely, releasing an even more berserk power of wind and thunder from within his body. Immediately, those wind and thunder little snakes became irritable, gnawing at the colossal dragon's body one after another, as if wanting to swallow the colossal dragon whole. Many ants could bite an elephant to death. Even if the colossal dragon's strength was any stronger, it was also unable to withstand 10,000 snakes devouring its body. Third-level Heavenly Emperor strength is indeed very formidable. Niet Tian stepped on the huge dragon, his whole body surging with sharp sword intent. What appeared on his face was not fear, but the desire to fight. "Stinking brat, contending with a third-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist with first-level Heavenly Emperor strength. You're overconfident. Ancestor Thundercloud smiled coldly, the roaring power of wind and lightning becoming more and more violent. Nietion only had first-level Heavenly Emperor strength, and actually still dared to rush over, simply seeking death. Really? Nietion spoke in a low voice. An even more violent thunder force gushed forth from his body, stimulating the Thunder Dragon. It raised its head to the sky and roared in rage. As its gigantic body spun about, the power of the Thunder Force Divine inscriptions completely erupted forth. Countless explosions rang out in the air. Those little snakes of wind and lightning were actually unable to withstand the pressure of the Thunder Force Divine inscriptions and shattered one after another. Ancestor Thundercloud felt a terrible pressure of thunder. His eyes trembled, and he cried out, "How is this possible?" Nietion's power of thunder had clearly been devoured by him. So how did it recover? Furthermore, looking at his aura, not only did the power of thunder recover, it even became stronger than before, seemingly fusing in an extremely terrifying power, exuding an oppressive aura that made people tremble. Everything on Nietion made Ancestor Thundercloud extremely shocked. His expression became slightly strange, his eyes filled with disbelief and terror. The power of thunder is my power. Want to use this kind of power to kill me? Wishful thinking. Nietion gave a roar, his entire body surging with a vast and mighty sword momentum. His entire person was like a sharp sword, the sharpness of his aura shaking heaven and earth. Wildly arrogant, Ancestor Thundercloud immediately calmed down, his eyes flickering with a ruthless intent. The vortex of wind and lightning behind him actually started expanding nonstop, instantly skyrocketing several dozen times, directly forming a terrifying abyss of wind and lightning in the void. Looking over, the abyss of wind and lightning was actually like a black hole, bottomless, releasing terrifying killing intent. Amen. When Nietion saw the abyss of wind and lightning, his gaze turned intense slightly, but the aura of his entire body became even wilder. God-piercing sword kill. Without the slightest hesitation, Nietion slashed out with his sword. The sword moved with thunder, vast and mighty, with the power of 10,000 caddies, as if the heaven and earth were collapsing. With the power of this sword, Nietion not only exerted the sword will of thunder to the extreme, but also integrated the power of sword patterns and the power of thunder divine patterns, suddenly erupting with a momentum that was earth-shattering. With your strength, you want to fight me head-on? You overestimate yourself. Cold, Ancestor Thundercloud smiled, and the abyss of wind and lightning pounced out like a ferocious beast, actually wanting to directly devour Nietion's sword shadow. Still want to devour? Can you devour it? Nietion sneered, and all the sword will of his body skyrocketed again. Suddenly, the momentum of heaven and earth was greatly oppressed, instantly changing, and a wave of rule power gushed out, merging with the mighty sword shadow. Boom! With a terrifying roar, the sword shadow bombarded the abyss of wind and lightning. A terrible force surged out, and a huge wave spread in all directions. The abyss of wind and lightning constantly rotated, raging with the power of wind and lightning, actually wanting to drown the terrible sword shadow. However, at this moment, the sword shadow suddenly erupted with the power of thunder. A strange force exploded, and the majestic sword will suddenly turned into a sky full of sharp blades, shooting in all directions. Chi. In the void, under the bombardment of countless sword will sharp blades, the abyss of wind and lightning was like a dam that was hit by raging waves, suddenly shaking. Impossible! Ancestor Thundercloud fixed his eyes on the abyss of wind and lightning, unexpectedly unable to devour the power of the sword will, but was instead torn apart by countless sharp blades. This unexpected scene made him scream, and the fear in his eyes slowly turned into despair. The abyss of wind and lightning was derived from the power of his bloodline. If it was destroyed, he would no longer have the slightest strength to resist. Ancestor Thundercloud originally thought that Nyetian was just a small fry, and even if he was lucky enough to reach the Heavenly Emperor realm, it was impossible for him to compete with him. However, he never thought that the situation of the battle would change in an instant. The power of thunder in Nyetian's body could actually suppress his wind and lightning bloodline. Break for me. Just at the moment when Ancestor Thundercloud was terrified, Niet Tianling's indifferent voice sounded. As this cold voice fell, the entire abyss of wind and lightning actually collapsed in an instant. Ancestor Thundercloud's body trembled and suddenly felt a tightness in his chest. He spat out a mouthful of dirty blood, and his face was as pale as paper. Why? Why? How can you compete with me with your strength? Ancestor Thundercloud's eyes trembled, and there was great shock and confusion in his eyes. He had clearly devoured Nyetian's power of thunder, and the power of his wind and lightning bloodline had greatly improved, but he still lost to Nyetian, and he lost so suddenly and so tragically that even the power of his bloodline was destroyed. Ancestor Thundercloud couldn't understand and died with everlasting regret. Sorry, you won't have the chance to know. Nye Tianling smiled coldly, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. Chapter 1046. Ancestor Thundercloud was defeated by Nye Tian, but he did not know the reason for his defeat. Apart from terror in his eyes, there was also doubt. Nye Tian's power of lightning could suppress the wind-thunder bloodline. But after Ancestor Thundercloud devoured the power of lightning, Nye Tian fused the power of the lightning divine vestige again and still suppressed the wind-thunder bloodline. Ancestor Thundercloud's wind-thunder bloodline was the power inherited from the wind-thunder killing formation, while the wind-thunder killing formation was actually the weak power of wind and lightning that escaped from the wind-thunder natural chasm. What Nye Tian fused with was the lightning attribute power in the wind-thunder divine vestige. The suppression on the wind-thunder bloodline was completely destructive. Therefore, even if Nye Tian only had first-level Heavenly Emperor strength, he could similarly defeat Ancestor Thundercloud, who had third-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Nye Tian was very clear about all this in his heart, but he would not let Ancestor Thundercloud die. He wanted to make the latter die with everlasting regrets. Why you want to kill me? Suddenly, Ancestor Thundercloud felt a cold, killing intent envelop over. His figure immediately trembled, his voice trembling hoarsely as he said, "This place is the Thundercloud Empire. There are thousands of Imperial Palace Dark Guards around you. If you kill me, they won't let you off." Humph humph. The corners of Nye Tian's eyes trembled a little, and he smiled coldly. His gaze swept over the surrounding Imperial Palace Dark Guards. All the people who were seen by him felt an inexplicable shudder. Ancestor Thundercloud, you're also too childish. Is this kind of threat useful to me? Nye Tianling smiled indifferently and said, "When you're alive, they all don't dare to touch. After you die, will there still be people who will avenge you?" Earlier, when Nye Tian and Ancestor Thundercloud had a great battle, the surrounding thousands of Dark Guards did not even dare to move. If Ancestor Thundercloud died, how could there possibly be people who would avenge him? Simply a joke. What would you want? I'll give you whatever you want. I'll let you be the ruler of the Thundercloud Empire. I'm willing to be your slave, be your dog. I beg you, don't kill me. The horror in Ancestor Thundercloud's eyes intensified. He actually walked over towards Nye Tian like he was in a daze, pleading hoarsely. Nye Tianling looked at him coldly, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. It was cold and creepy. Die. At that moment, Ancestor Thundercloud suddenly let out a furious roar. His figure trembled, and a blade of lightning shot out towards Nye Tian. Ancestor Thundercloud had bet everything on this final strike. His begging just now was just to divert Nye Tian's attention. Oomph. However, Nye Tian only smiled coldly, as if he had already expected this. He casually stabbed out with his sword. The sword light whistled like a gale, and a bloody light shot out, dripping with blood. Ancestor Thundercloud didn't even have time to scream before he died. Ancestor Thundercloud, a third-level heavenly emperor martial artist, finally still died in Nietion's hands. When the crowd saw this scene, their eyes trembled violently. Many people's expressions were petrified. The entire scene fell into an oppressive silence. No one could have thought that Ancestor Thundercloud actually really died, dying at the hands of a young man. Ancestor Thundercloud was the founder of the Thundercloud Empire, an old monster who had lived for more than 800 years. Dying in this way in the end, it made people sigh. Countless gazes stared at Nietion, their gazes all filled with fear and awe. This was a world where martial arts reigned supreme. If Nietion's strength was not strong enough, the way he died would be even more tragic than Ancestor Thundercloud. Tang 13 and Tang Yu were also dumbfounded from watching by the side. They originally wanted to make a move, but before they could make a move in time, the battle was already over. Nietion fighting Ancestor Thundercloud. The battle situation virtually crushed him. This shocked the two too much. Emperor Thundercloud, get out here. Right at this time, Nietion suddenly roared angrily. His voice rumbled like thunder, insolent to the extreme. What does he want to do? Could it be that he wants to massacre the Morong family? The crowd's hearts secretly trembled, their hearts leaping to their throats. Many people felt that Nietion was definitely going to wipe out the Morong family, cutting the weeds by the roots. After Nietion's voice faded, there was no movement for a long time. No one stood out. At this time, everyone knew that whoever stood out would be the one to die. The mighty Emperor Thundercloud doesn't even have the courage to stand out. Nietion sneered, his eyes flashing with contempt. Right at this time, a figure rushed into the sky, appearing in front of Nietion. When Nietion saw the face of the person, he could not help but be stunned. It was a young man with a delicate face, looking to be around 20 years old, but his strength was very strong, already at the 5th level of sky being. This is not His Majesty the Emperor. When the crowd saw that person, they were all stunned because he was not Emperor Thundercloud. I'm a 19th Prince of the Thundercloud Empire, Morong Hong. If you still want to kill, start with me. Morong Hong said with a deep voice. There was no trace of fear on his face, and he was as calm as water. 19th Prince. The crowd was stunned again. Many people did not know him at all. Very well. Nietion looked at Morong Hong, smiled faintly, and said, From now on, you are no longer the 19th Prince, but the new Emperor of the Thundercloud Empire. Morong Hong frowned, not expecting Nietion to say such a thing. The crowd was also stunned, looking at Nietion in a daze. Nietion was too overbearing, actually deciding to be the Emperor of Thundercloud. The original Emperor of Thundercloud. I know you are here. Since you don't want to come out, then forget it. But listen up from now on. You are no longer the Emperor of Thundercloud because you are not worthy. Nietion said coldly, every word like thunder. The mighty Emperor did not even have the courage to stand out, so it was better not to be the Emperor. Morong Hong was not bad. Even if he was weak, at least he was responsible. Such a person should sit on the throne of the Emperor. Then, Nietion's gaze swept across the surrounding palace guards and directly released a wave of spiritual deterrence. Then, he said, From now on, your Emperor is Morong Hong. Do you understand? Yes. The palace guard were stunned at first, then they felt a bone-chilling coldness, which made their hearts tremble, and they all nodded. Nietion had even killed Ancestor Thundercloud. How would these guards dare to disobey him? Nietion nodded, expressing his satisfaction, then locked his gaze on Morong Hong, and said, Morong Hong, the Empress of the Wild Sandland, Medusa, is my friend. I want you to promise me that you will never disturb the Serpentine tribe. Morong Hong's eyes darkened, and after a long time, he nodded. Very well, Nietion smiled. I believe that you are a man of your word. Then, Nietion did not stay any longer and directly went to Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu's side. The three of them flickered and disappeared in an instant. Countless eyes stared in the direction where the three disappeared. Many people had yet to react. With just a few simple sentences, The emperor of the Thundercloud Empire had changed. This was too unbelievable. On the ground, countless members of the Murong royal clan sighed sorrowfully. Their expressions were extremely awful. If they had known that they could become the emperor like this, everyone would have stood up without hesitation. Unfortunately, it was too late to say anything now. Chapter 1047. Land of Wild Sand, Serpent Palace Hall. The Thundercloud Empire has a new emperor. In the hall, Queen Medusa's voice sounded. Her voice was sharp because of her surprise. Nietian nodded and said, "Your Majesty, Murong Hong has already promised me that the Thundercloud Empire will never disturb the Serpent People tribe." Queen Medusa's delicate face stiffened for a few seconds. She was so excited that she did not know what to say. She did not expect that Nietian actually protected the Serpent People tribe in the half a day he went to the Thundercloud Empire. Actually, Nietian did not say everything. If Queen Medusa knew that the three elders were killed by Nietian, it was unknown what kind of expression she would have. "Your Majesty, it is all thanks to you that Tang 13 and I were able to escape this time." At this time, Tang 13 smiled and thanked her solemnly. Queen Medusa calmed down and smiled faintly. "Young Master Tang is too kind. This Empress actually did not do much. The one you should really thank is Mr. Nietian." Tang 13 smiled faintly and looked at Nietian, but did not say anything. There was no need for thanks between the two of them. This time, if Nietian did not appear, Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu would probably be sleeping in the wind-thunder natural chasm forever. Queen Medusa did not expect that Nietian and the other two could actually break through to the Heavenly Emperor realm. Truly amazing. Next, Nietian prepared to rest for a night to recover his strength. Tomorrow morning, he would enter the Destiny Forest with Tang 13 and Tang Yuyu to break the forest restriction. The forest restriction had 4 weak points. As long as 4 Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists cooperated well, they could break the restriction. Finally returned to the Heavenly Emperor realm. In the room, Nietian muttered to himself. He used his divine sense to feel his body and was quite satisfied with his current strength. It had been almost 5 years since he died and was reborn. Within 5 years, Nietian had advanced from a person whose yuan meridians were all destroyed to the current Heavenly Emperor realm. His strength had grown so fast that it made people's hair stand on end. "My identity has already been exposed, and my strength has already reached the Heavenly Emperor realm. Next, it's time to head to the Heaven realm." As Nietian spoke, a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Luo Chinhun, Luo Zian, I, Nietian, have returned." After a while, Nietian gradually calmed down. "Right, my strength has advanced to the Heavenly Emperor realm, and I've awakened 310 billion stars. The 4th layer of the galaxy is starting to awaken. I wonder what will appear this time." Suddenly, Nietian thought of the primal star stones, and his eyes shone with an unconcealable passion. He had already confirmed that every time his strength increased by a small realm, he would awaken 10 billion star force and increase his spiritual power by 1 level. Heaven Shrouding Totem, Starry Sky, Hellfire Crucible. What will be next? Nietian murmured. His divine sense appeared in the starry domain. The domain origin formation revolved slowly. The primal star stones connected the 9 layers of the galaxy. Above the 1st layer of the galaxy was the flashing Heaven Shrouding Totem. Above the 2nd layer of the galaxy was the Starry Sky, Above the 3rd layer of the galaxy was the Hellfire Crucible. Slowly, Nietian's gaze fell on the 4th layer of the galaxy. Above the 4th layer of the galaxy, countless stars twinkled faintly, like a night sky filled with fireflies. Nietian's gaze wandered along the primal star stones. Slowly, he saw a ball of dark light appear in the distant galaxy. What is that? Nietian looked at the ball of dark light and couldn't help but stare blankly. The ball of dark light released a vast and ancient aura, like a blurred abyss, floating above the galaxy. With a thought, Nietian's divine sense swept over. At this moment, the black ball of light dispersed like a dense fog, gradually dissipating. When the fog completely disappeared, what appeared above the galaxy was a dazzling scroll. Starry Sky, Ancient Martial Technique. At this moment, a mighty and powerful voice came from above the galaxy, causing the entire galaxy to tremble. This is... Nyetian was stunned. His throat rolled, and he spat out two words, martial technique. He was stunned for a long time, with a dazed expression. After a long time, he slowly reacted. He never thought that the fourth layer of the galaxy would have a martial technique. This made Nyetian a little disappointed. He originally thought that the fourth layer of the galaxy would have something even more terrifying, such as a terrible seal, a spirit formation, and so on. He never thought that there would be a martial technique. He didn't want to practice too many martial techniques because his 9 extremes war, God technique, and proud sword technique were already beyond the heaven stage. He felt that there was not much point in practicing other martial techniques. After calming down a little, Nyetian calmed his disappointed mood and looked at the martial technique scroll above the galaxy. The Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique scroll, like a ball of light, quietly floated above the galaxy, slowly releasing a vast and simple aura, giving people a feeling that it was incomparably huge. It was as if the martial technique contained all the phenomena of the world and everything in the world. The feeling of vastness and boundlessness was shocking. Nyetian felt the majestic aura of the Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique, and his originally disappointed eyes slowly became passionate. Since the Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique appeared in the fourth layer of the galaxy, it must be an extraordinary martial technique. It should not be worse than the heaven-shrouding totem, the eye of starry sky, and the furnace of hell. Nyetian muttered to himself, and the corner of his mouth involuntarily raised into a smile of excitement. The Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique was created by the Starry Sky Saint after comprehending the chaotic void. It is divided into 9 forms. The first form, the morning star break, the second form. At this moment, a vast and boundless voice sounded, introducing the Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique. After hearing this voice, Nyetian couldn't help but be stunned for a long time. The Starry Sky Saint? After a long time, he came back to his senses. His heart was full of doubts, and he guessed that this should be a person's name. However, there was no rank of the Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique in a martial technique, which made Nyetian feel even more surprised. The martial technique created by the Starry Sky Saint must be of a high rank. Nyetian laughed and was ready to open the martial technique to take a look to see what kind of magical martial technique was recorded in it. With a thought, the Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique sensed it and immediately released a dazzling halo, which rippled on the galaxy, causing the entire galaxy to shine brightly and the stars to shine. In the next moment, the Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique scroll slowly opened, and endless halos were released, illuminating the entire galaxy. The surrounding scenery became incomparably beautiful, and above the galaxy surged a mysterious aura. At the moment when the Starry Sky Ancient Martial Technique scroll was completely opened, what appeared in front of Nyetian was endless starlight runes. When Nyetian saw the starlight runes, his eyes slightly narrowed, and he felt a very mysterious aura, which made him feel incomparably comfortable. However, it was a pity that he couldn't understand these starlight runes at all, and he couldn't understand the meaning of the runes. Is that all? Nyetian was taken aback and somewhat speechless. Just as he finished speaking, endless starlight runes suddenly flew out of the scroll, surging in the galaxy, and the entire galaxy was immediately filled with a simple and mysterious concept.